I'd like to welcome everyone this evening to the East Lyme Inland Wetlands Agency special meeting. It's Monday, May 18th, 2020. It is 7:05 p.m. This evening, we are meeting remotely via Zoom. I anticipate with a bunch of very intelligent people will have no problem, but technology is what it is, and it seems that yesterday, church services were unable to be performed because Zoom crashed. So let's all be patient and mindful of that together. At this point, I'm just going to, as we do, I'm going to blow through item by item in the agenda. And assuming everyone can hear, if you can't, please, by all means, you can reach out to one of us. Jen, did you turn the chat function off?
The private chat function is off, but the group chat is on.
All right. And so, you know, the reason we did that is that we don't want any conversation that could be happening with any impropriety here. So if you do have a technical issue or you disappear, please, by all means, Jen really is the center for asking any questions or anything you might need. So you can send her, you guys, does everyone understand how to do that? At the bottom, if you hover down, there's a little chat thing. It's got 3 dots in it. You click on that, you can send a message. I will send a message. This is a test. Everyone will see that. Boom, there you go. So first item on our agenda, as we usually do, tonight I'd just like to make sure that we go over actually with our call to order all of the committee members that are here. I'm Gary Upton. I'm the chairman. We've got Kristen Chantrell. We've got, in order of that I see them, we've got Rosemary Ostfeld. We've got Dr. Fye, also known as Don Fiminster, yeah? Sandy Jignack, is that how I say it, Sandy? Is good. Dave Schmidt, Doreen Ryan, Mr. W. Theodore Koch III. And then the rest of the meeting consists of applicants and some of the public. It appears, hi, Mary is here, I believe, from the day. Nice to see you if you can hear us. And then the last page I have, oh, sorry, Phyllis, you're way down on the bottom of my thing. I really apologize. Phyllis Berger, our secretary, is here. I apologize for missing you at the top. So now that we know who's on board, I'd like to start to ask if there are any additions to this agenda, last minute additions from anyone here this evening. If anyone wants to raise their hand, any of the commission members, Ted is raising his cup of coffee. Moving on from item number 1, we're going to go to public hearings. We currently don't have any public hearings, so we're going to move quickly on to public delegations. This is a time where members of the public are invited to speak. A little bit of a tricky item for us with this virtual meeting here. But I'm going to read the public delegations, kind of the ground rules of such, and then Jen, I believe, is going to unmute any of the members of the public that might be here in the event that any of you would like to speak. Public delegations is the time when members of the public are invited to speak to the commission about certain matters, issues or concerns related to approved wetland permits, and in-house proposals or general topics of discussion are open to comment. Keeping in mind agenda items, referrals, applications subject to a decision by the commission, a public hearing, or in litigation may not be discussed. The members of the commission will not directly answer questions or make comment during delegations. We are simply here to listen. Jen, I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, I think for convenience, I'm just going to unmute everybody.
Okay. So I believe we have everyone unmuted. We are currently in the public delegations part of our agenda. Do we have any members of the public that would like to speak?
Hold on, I got a couple that I'm, okay, they've muted themselves, so.
Yep. Believe we don't have, yeah, I see that. Anyone with the Public, if you'd like to raise your hand, both physically or digitally, please do so. We're going to be a little bit excessively redundant tonight, just understanding that people are probably fighting a little bit with this technology. Going once, going twice. Back to Jennifer Lindo.
Okay. I am going to mute everybody again.
Just for clarity, I received a message that says all set from Kim.
Okay. And I think you're good to go.
All right, moving on to item number 4, the acceptance of the minutes from our last meeting back in February 24th of 2020, our special meeting. Commission, do we have any comments on this that we would have any concerns about before we go into a motion to approve those minutes? No, no hands raised. Looks good. So hearing no comments regarding that, if someone would like to make a motion, raise your hand and I'll unmute you. Rosemary is going to be unmuted. Rosemary Osfeld is making a motion, I presume. Go ahead, Rosemary, sorry.
Board member Rosemary Osfeld, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from February.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
It looks like we've got a few seconds, Kristen Chantrell and also Mr. David Schmidt. For the sakes of Sue Spang, we'll go with whichever you choose, Sue. Put it on you.
Okay, I saw Kristen first, so I'll put
Okay.
her.
And now, one by one, we're going to learn how this works. One by one, we are going to go through the committee members and asking them if they approve this motion. I approve this motion to approve the minutes from the February 24th, 2020 special meeting. Rosemary, do you approve the motion?
I approve the
Do we
motion.
have a freeze? Mr. Fye?
Yeah, I second.
All right, we've
I
got
second the
another
motion.
approval. We've already got the motion standing, so we're just looking for a vote on the motion. Kristen Shant, thank you though. Sorry, you're breaking up a little. Kristen?
Yes, I approve.
Approved. Sandy?
Yes, I approve the motion.
Mr. Schmidt?
Dave Schmidt approves.
Doreen?
Yes, I approve.
Mr. Koch?
Aye.
All right.
Don't forget
And-
Phyllis.
Oh yeah, sorry, Phyllis. Thank you so much, Jen. Phyllis,
Oh, that's okay.
you approve the motion?
Yes, I do.
All right, no revisions or changes. There we have it. It's approved, the acceptance of the minutes from the February 24th, 2020 special meeting. Thank you, everybody. Moving on to item number 5, the ex officio report. I don't believe our ex officio is here with us this evening, Mr. Paul Daigle, unless he's under a separate cover that I don't know about. Mr. Daigle, if you're here, by all means, let us know. Don't believe he is. Anyone else disagree? Jen, I don't see Daigle, right?
He's not in here. He's at
Okay.
a Board of Finance. He's at the Board of Finance meeting.
That's a good excuse. So moving on from that, pending applications. We're going to go on to item number 6 of the agenda, our pending applications. The North Bridebrook Multi-Family Development application of Paz and Construction LLC. Jason Pazaglia, applicant, Paz and Construction LLC, owner, to conduct regulated activities in the upland review area in association with a proposed multi-family residential community on property identified in the application as N Bridebrook Road, East Lyme Assessors Map 09.0, Lot 37-2.
Okay. I am going to unmute Attorney Heller and Jason Pizzaglia while we're
Sounds good.
discussing all of this.
Yep. And one thing I want to keep everyone in mind of, again, thank you for everyone for showing up this evening. If you have one thought that I've been trying to think of really for people like Phyllis that might be listening on the phone, we really need to think that most of what we need to do is for audible clarity. While we can see each other and it's enjoyable, There are many people that might just be able to listen to this file later. So I would often kind of graze over those details on pending application because in person we're able to, display them. So I think it's very important. If I seem overly redundant, I apologize, but we are but singing a song for people so that they can listen back. Attorney Heller, can we confirm you can speak?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
And since the public hearing is closed, I won't be making any comments this evening unless it's some kind of a procedural issue, but I will not be speaking about anything substantive that may have been presented during the public hearing.
All right. Thank you. Jen, with that in mind, for the sakes of background noise, I would mute Attorney Heller.
Yep.
And we can clearly see if Attorney Heller has his hand up in front of his law library there. Exactly. And
Okay.
if he does, we'll certainly unmute him and let him have his time. I think the same would stand. Jason, can you hear us?
Oh, I muted Jason.
Oh, did you? Okay. I would assume the same would stand for Jason as he's
Yeah.
Represented by Attorney Heller. Shall we just check with him that that's okay?
Jason, can you hear us?
Yep, that sounds great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
Okay.
All right. So is our commissions unmuted?
Unless they have themselves muted, yes.
All right. Rosemary, I just
Hello?
unmuted.
Yeah.
Phyllis, can you hear
Okay.
us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear
Okay.
me?
Yep, I can.
Thank you.
So I think, again, going back to having a good record here, let's outline the things we've gone through already with this application.
Can I just add one thing? That I've previously recused myself from this, and Doreen sat in for me. And so I think that the record should reflect that that is continuing.
Thank you, Mr. Koch.
And I'll mute myself now.
No, you're okay.
I would prefer to.
Okay. Mr. Koch, would you be able to turn your video off for me if you're going to recuse yourself for this matter?
Turn my video?
Yeah, because if we were in the public forum, I would ask you to actually leave the room
True.
rather than sit in the audience.
And how do I find out when you are finished?
Miss Lindo will turn your video back on.
Can I do that?
Yeah.
So can you? I don't want him to leave the meeting. I just need him to shut the video off so you don't see him waving hands, similar to public forum.
He's gone. We'll miss you, Ted.
Beautiful.
Oh. He is. No, he's still in the meeting. He turned off his video.
Right. We'll just turn it
We
back
have
on.
somebody waiting. No, I
Yep.
think you're right. Not that we would expect it of Ted, Gary, but if we had facial expressions about things we're talking about, right? You just,
Correct.
It's probably best.
You guys can't see me or hear me?
No, we can hear you.
You can hear me. Okay.
I'll
So
mute
I
you.
can, I mean,
He's been muted.
Okay.
Ted,
Moving
you're
on.
muted. Sorry to cut you off. So could we just go through, Mr. Gaishel, could you outline the procedure that we've so far had for this application so that anyone that might be listening for the first time, they know what the commission has done in regard to this North Brybrook multifamily development application?
Certainly. And, obviously for the record, anything that's obviously discussed tonight had to be posted on our town website 24 hours in advance of this meeting in order to discuss it. So that said, I did provide a memorandum, which is
Could you introduce yourself just to make sure we have?
Gary Gaishel, inland wetland agent, town of East Lyme. I did provide the commission with the memorandum, which is typical. At the last meeting, which was February 24th, we closed the public hearing and the agency directed me to draft correspondence. So I did. You do have that available. Hopefully you had a chance to take a look at it. But for the record, I will go through the findings. And essentially, upon my review of the plan entitled North Brybrook Multifamily Development Prepared for PAS and Construction LLC, sheets 1 through 7, dated 9/25/2019, and revised through 1/15/2020 by Brandon J. Hanfield, PE of Yantic River Consultants, LLC, of 191 Norwich Avenue, Lebanon, Connecticut. And several meetings with the applicant's engineer, town staff, and I believe we had two evenings of public hearing. I may be mistaken, but that's in the memo. Anyway, moving on, what I found in my review, that the application requirements of the inland wetland regulations, that the applicant has provided all the information required by section 7.5, and that the necessary additional information required by section 7.6, which was including but not limited to proposed alternatives, engineering reports and analysis, description of ecological communities, and functions of the wetlands and watercourses, and effects of the proposed activity on these communities and wetland functions and alternatives which would cause less or no environmental impact to wetlands or watercourses, as well as an operations and maintenance plan for stormwater structures, stormwater management plan, erosion sedimentation control plan, and site development plans. So based on my review, the application certainly appears complete. Whereas in accordance with section 7.6, the agency required information to be submitted, including but not limited to site plans, which show the land which will be affected thereby, which shows existing and proposed conditions, wetland and watercourse boundaries, contours, and other pertinent features of the land and the proposed activity. Whereas the agency may find the application to be in conformance with the inland wetlands and regulations of the town of East Lyme, and more specifically based on the following. We received an inland wetlands application from Jason Pizzaglia of Paz and Construction LLC, dated November 22nd, 2019, and the agency commenced review of the application at a regular meeting on December 9th, 2019. Whereas the agency at their December 9th, 2019 meeting scheduled a public hearing to commence on January 27th, 2020, and published notice of said hearing in the January 15th and January 23rd, 2020 editions of the day paper. Whereas the agency commenced the public hearing on January 27th, 2020, which was continued to the agency's meeting of February 24th, 2020, and closed that same evening. There we go, it was held twice. Whereas town staff provided the agency with comment concerning the application's compliance with local requirements and regulations, as well as received testimony from the applicant's professionals and general public. Whereas the application submitted includes all the information required pursuant to section 7.5 of the East Lyme Inland Wetland Regulations and East Lyme Inland Wetlands and Watercourse Regulations, and includes site plans, engineering reports, and wetlands delineations by a soil scientist depicted on the site plans. As such, the applicant submitted in accordance with section 7.1 of the East Lyme Inland Wetland Regulations, again, verifying that it's complete. Whereas there is no direct impact on the wetlands or watercourse, as all the construction activities will be conducted within the 100-foot upland review area from an inland wetland and watercourse. Therefore, there are no irreversible and irretrievable losses of wetlands or watercourse which would be caused by the proposed regulated activity. Whereas the project has been designed to protect the wetlands and the watercourse, as the building structures, driveways, and drainage structures are designed to be situated outside of the wetlands and located in the upland review area, as well as the public utilities, the sewer, water, electric, etc., which are all being installed within existing upland areas. Whereas mitigation measures to minimize and mitigate the potential impacts from the creation of new impervious surfaces on the site and to protect the wetlands and watercourses, such stormwater management structures, catch basins in this case, and the retention pond will pre-treat and control runoff and promote groundwater recharge. Whereas the potential impacts are mitigated by the implementation of temporary erosion sedimentation controls, as well as stormwater controls throughout all phases of construction. Whereas the upland review process does not forbid activity based solely on proximity to wetlands. Rather, the upland review process merely provides a basis for determining whether activities will have an adverse impact on the adjacent wetlands or watercourse, and if necessary, regulating them. Whereas pursuant to section 10.5 of the East Lyme Inland Wetlands and Watercourse Regulations, for the purpose of those sections, 1, in paren, quote, wetlands and watercourses, end quote, includes aquatic, plant, or animal life and habitats and wetlands or watercourses, and 2, quote, habitats, end quote, means areas or environments in which an organism or biological population normally lives or occurs. Whereas pursuant to section 10.5 of the East Lyme Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Regulations, a municipal inland wetland agency shall not deny or condition an application for a regulated activity in an area outside wetlands or watercourses on the basis of an impact or effect on aquatic, plant, or animal life, unless such activity will likely impact or affect the physical characteristics of such wetlands and watercourses. Whereas this demonstrated by Exhibit L, the memorandum from Victor Benny, PE, and town engineer to myself, dated January 27, 2020, regarding the North Brybrook multifamily development. The stormwater management report prepared in accordance with the 2004 Connecticut Stormwater Quality Manual verifies that the proposed detention pond attenuates peak flow rates and volumes as compared to the pre-development conditions, resulting in a net zero increase in runoff from the development for the 2 through 100-year storm events. And whereas the proposed detention pond will enhance stormwater runoff quality and recharge the groundwater, as stormwater from the closed drainage system will enter a sediment forebay, which is separated from the detention basin by a detention filter berm, before passing through the semi-pervious filter berm into the detention basin itself. And whereas the erosion and sedimentation narrative and construction details provide construction notes and a long-term maintenance plan for the stormwater detention basin. Moreover, the erosion sedimentation control plan was prepared in accordance with the 2002 Connecticut Guidelines for Soil Erosion and Sediment Control by the Connecticut DEEP, and includes a narrative, construction sequence, and vegetative turf establishment procedures. And whereas demonstrated by Exhibit H, plan review comments from Brad Cargill, the town utilities engineer, dated 12/12/2019, found the conceptual layout of the water and sewer utilities to be acceptable. Whereas the record before the agency, which includes Exhibit B, the wetlands report from James Sipperly, soil scientist, dated October 3rd, 2019, states, quote, "The proposed development in the upland review area will not be disturbing any wetlands or water courses on the site. For that reason, the inland wetlands will continue to perform their functions as they currently do, period," end quote. As such, the proposed activity will avoid any direct impacts to the wetlands or water courses, and the design has been prepared to minimize the potential for secondary and indirect impacts through the implementation of the erosion and sedimentation control plan. And whereas demonstrated by Exhibit L, a memorandum from Victor Benny, town engineer, and Exhibit A, application and project narrative, Exhibit B, the soils report by James Sipperly, the project will not significantly change the hydrology of the wetlands and watercourse in question, as the drainage design provides recharge to the on-site wetlands and watercourse by discharging the roof runoff from buildings I, J, and M at the westerly corner of each building to a riprap splash pad, which it then flows overland.
Could you cite that? Which exhibit was that again?
That was Exhibits L, Exhibits A, the project narrative, which was in that Exhibit A, Exhibit B, the soils.
The one you're referring to.
I just referred to L, B, and A.
Okay.
And I was referring to the buildings I, J, and M at the westerly corner of each building. There's to be a riprap splash pad at the end of the roof to catch the roof runoff from the gutter, which will then overland flow to the wetland in order to replicate the existing flows which currently reach and contribute to the recharge of the wetland system. And whereas, although the proposed construction would pose an intrusion into the upland area, introducing a new and more intensive use than the present condition, forested land, and risks to the wetlands, there is no substantial evidence in the record to support a likely adverse impact on the wetlands and watercourse from the proposed upland intrusion. Whereas the record before the agency of the current application contains no specific evidence that the impacts on the wetlands or watercourse are significant, adverse, and would likely impact or affect the physical characteristics of such wetlands and watercourse. And whereas demonstrated by Exhibit A, the application and supporting documentation, including the proposed plans entitled, quote, North Brybrook Multifamily Development Prepared for PAS and Construction, LLC, sheets 1 through 7, dated 9/25/2019, and revised through 1/15/2020 by Brandon J. Hanfield, PE of Yantic River Consultants, LLC, at 191 Norwich Ave, Lebanon, Connecticut. And there are no other prudent and feasible alternatives yielding a 100-unit multifamily development that would eliminate or further reduce the potential for wetland impacts. As a proposed activity is of limited duration with no direct or likely adverse impact to the wetlands or watercourse, it would be the preferred alternative. And I also provide you a suggested motion with several conditions. Most of these are typical. I will note, I can read through those for you.
I think I'd hold off on reading any motions at this point before we have further discussion.
Okay, so as far as to add to your discussion, but these are conditions that I would say you would want to hash over. Obviously, the erosion and sediment control plan, they're going to have to follow that sequence. The big item would be item number 6, as indicated in Exhibit L, the memo from Victor Benny. He recommended a $30,000 financial guarantee for the erosion and sedimentation controls, otherwise known as a bond.
Right, all ordinary measures that we would have on any potential approved application. I just want to be careful that we're not positioning ourselves to discuss motion, which is approval, which we've yet to have as a committee together, whether we are approving or denying the application.
Correct. Right. This whole process is deliberation to get to that point. This is my memo is a jumping off point based on my review of the application and the materials submitted. I would note also, I believe I had added a potential for a conservation easement over the watercourse area and the wetlands associated with it as a condition if the commission wanted to discuss that as well. But that is item. It was condition 12 in my memo. In this case, it was a 200-foot wide easement, basically 100 feet from each side of the stream. It's an idea. It's something the commission can discuss. The rest of the conditions are pretty much standard, notifying the agency, posting of inland wetland conservation tags at intervals of 40 to 50 feet. Those are provided by the town. That's all I have for my memo, and I'll leave it to the commission to discuss. If they have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Gaishel. And I just want to encourage everyone to be as personal as possible through these machines we're talking on, right? So we'll have to abide by the difficulty of speaking this way. But does anyone want to jump off with any points, questions? I know it's been a while since we've met, which does add a little difficulty. Let's just try and get our juices flowing again if we can. Does anyone have anything that we'd like to rip into? Show a hand if you would, please, before you say something. Nobody has anything to say. Ms. Osfeld, yes?
Or Don, did you have something you wanted to say first?
No, it's adjusting my glasses, sorry.
Okay. I just had a question about whether it is possible for us to have an independent expert assess potential impacts on the wetland within the site and also impacts on Bride Lake. This site is approximately 500 feet from the drinking water supply, so I was wondering if it's possible to have an independent assessment done.
So we have a question from Rosemary Osfeld. She's a commissioner. For those of you that might be listening on your phones, and I believe if I'm right, the question is, can we have a, how did you say it, a third party?
An independent expert assess potential impacts.
On the behalf of this commission?
Yes.
Okay. I think I would have to turn to our agent at this point and see Mr. Gaishel if there's, is that okay? Rosemary, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That was my question. That's fine.
Mr. Gaishel, is there, can you enlighten us?
So my answer is we can have an independent review of the impacts, but they wouldn't be, that information wouldn't be able to be entered into the record for review because we closed the public hearing. That said, we do have a line item in our budget which does allow for the commission to hire a third party peer review. That is charged back to the applicant through a complex application fee. So we could do it, but in this case, we wouldn't necessarily be charging a complex application fee because the public hearing is closed and the information wouldn't be admissible. So we'd have to toss it out.
Which would, in a sense, so can you, what part of our regulations, so that is something it says in our regulations that we couldn't bring it in because a public hearing is over? Sorry if it's pages making.
I would turn to the statutes primarily on the conducting a public hearing.
Gentlemen, I believe Rosemary has a question.
Sorry.
Follow-up question, is it possible to reopen the public hearing?
Unfortunately, no. Not unless the applicant withdrew and resubmitted.
Are we sure that section, the governor's orders don't allow us to do that?
I have not looked at the governor's orders in regards to that. My understanding of the governor's orders is we had a 90-day extension on all land use applications. With the exception of outdoor dining, there wasn't any changes to the regulations for inland wetland activities. Even outdoor dining, in theory, based on the governor's order, could fall under the discretion of the inland wetlands agents if the outdoor dining area was within the upland review area. The question there is, does the agency want to pursue that at this time?
I'm gonna.
Nothing else in the executive orders did I see that would say that the commission could reopen the public hearing because it was properly closed on the 24th.
All right. I would, if I could call on one of my commissioners, Ms. Ostfeld, if you could, we should get to the bottom of why. I mean, I want to know, what the thought is there. I would presuppose that for myself, on the record, there were some conflicting statements that I had a hard time understanding during the discussion from Brandon, the engineer, and also Attorney Heller to the commission. I would say if you remember, there was quite a point of what seemed like upset where we were talking about a break line in the property where the watershed was going one direction and some of the watershed was going the other direction. And there was a change in that watershed and how it potentially impacted the DOT drain, the detention basin, the outflow from the detention basin. I'm presupposing that, that's just one of my concerns where there's a little confliction. When we talk about our regulations, just an ear note here, I think when we talk about our regulations later this evening, this is something we should consider doing, in my opinion, to any public hearing, any item that's brought to public hearing, because if, in following our regulations, unless the section 9 of our regulations, page 16, unless the Inland Wetland Agency determines that the proposed activity may have a significant impact on wetlands or watercourses, we can't have a public hearing unless we find that. So clearly we've found or have a curiosity that we feel there's going to be an impact, in which case I think it's worth bringing most, if not all, applicants to that place where we have a third party to evaluate these situations, because as the applicant has the right to do, they have the right to hire an attorney to fight on their behalf with fervence, and to do his job that he's employed to do. If we have landowners that are potentially non-existent, the state, maybe they don't have the income to afford to fight for what they might feel. We could be essentially assuming, hey, we've done a public hearing, we've got everyone here, but there is in fact someone that might want to say and do something. So I feel your question for me is a jumping off point, Rosemary. I'm sorry to jump on this like this, but if not for this case, for others, it's a good example that I think we can't just brush under the carpet and not utilize, especially if we have a fund, Mr. Gaishel, to do so. Anyone have anything on that? Ms. Chantrell.
Well, I'm gathering that if we were to get a third-party evaluation, we can't submit it for the record towards our decision anyway.
Right.
So we have to just discuss what was presented so far amongst and make a decision based on that information.
Yes.
Right. There's nothing that we can do as far as a third party at this point.
At this point, correct.
Okay.
Looks like Mr. Schmidt has a question.
I would just like to say, if that's the route we choose to go, and I'm not suggesting one way or the other, you would have to deny the application without prejudice and let him come back again and then request it at that time. But I'm not suggesting that's the only way to get back to it, isn't it?
My understanding of the discussion, and I could be taking it a different way, is that I'm spitballing a concept jumping off of what Ms. Ostfeld's explaining, And Mr. Gaishel seems to be fairly certain that we could not bring new data in at this point. I suppose, Mr. Gaishel, is what Mr. Schmidt said correct, that we could essentially deny the application with no prejudice because essentially a reset button on the application? Is that what you mean, Mr. Schmidt?
That's the intent. If that's what the commission or the agency decides it wants is a outside professional review, I don't see any other option but to deny it and then have him bring it back. But I'm just throwing it out there. It's
Mr. Gaishel?
Well, my question would be, if the agency was to do that, what would change substantially within the application? Probably not much. I mean, as it stands, based on the review, and as the record stands, there's nothing in it that would suggest that there's an adverse impact to the wetlands. That's based on Mr. Sipperly, who is a certified soil scientist. So I would anticipate that a third-party review, another soil scientist, would probably have a similar response.
I guess that's not really the question, though. Is procedurally, could we deny with no prejudice so that that could happen?
You could. I don't recommend it because I don't know where in the record and for what basis is the application incomplete. I don't know that it's incomplete. And typically when you deny an application without prejudice, it's because it's incomplete.
I felt, on that question, I felt something I wanted to bring up this evening was the discussion of the detention basin.
Yeah.
And I see a hand up. Rosemary?
Yeah, there's no hydrologist on this project. So
Before we get into that, my concern, sorry, I don't mean to mitigate what you're saying. My concern is that I see a detention basin, and I do speak to the commission on this very, very intentfully. I see a detention basin in a design that's supposed to catch water from buildings. Simple, right? Water runoff from pavement, some of which is from roofs. Some roofs are going to Bry Brook to the west. The rest are going to the detention basin. It was stated that it meets and exceeds the 100-year flood test or something or else. But if there were ever to be excessive flooding, which we were told there was knee-high water, I forget the gentleman's name, but there was knee-high water flooding on the site. One member of the public said this during the public hearing. If there's that matter of water and you're changing the topography of the land, my concern, and this is not yet my point of the incomplete statement, my concern is that we have a detention pond that's receiving who knows what from driveways, antifreeze from cars, who knows what pollutants from roundups and all those different things, right? But my concern is that the outflow of that detention basin relied on a DOT drain in the road, which I heard again was already floods in the road as it is. That outflow then flows onto another property. That property owner is not here. I'm not sure that that property owner has had, Gary can tell me who that is, but I'm not sure that that property owner has had either for them or themselves the research done. I certainly would feel myself, I would liken it to if I had an exhaust pipe coming from my basement and I burned oil in my basement and I exhausted my exhaust pipe into your yard, just a few feet into your yard, and trust me, it's safe. You can breathe this air. You certainly would say, no, this is my property. You're not allowed to put your basement exhaust pipe on my property. And I feel that that is the largest piece of incomplete data on this application. I feel that I would want to see the applicant come back with supporting evidence from the property that they are accounting for, because we're not thinking 100 years. You know, we want to know that in the event there's facts showing that the amount of water that we have in the atmosphere just continues to grow. I feel that that is a very, at least one piece of an incomplete element of this application. Rosemary, I see your hand up. Go ahead. I apologize for cutting you off on the hydrology thing. Go ahead.
That's fine, but yeah, this retention basin that you're talking about is within the aquifer protection zone, and the land that you're concerned about is owned by the state.
Right.
But then ultimately, that adjacent land is abutting the Bride Lake, which is the water source for our town.
So in the event of the, remembering, guys, I'm going to bring you back. Because of COVID, I've spent so much time with these regulations. But the significant impact definition, page 8 of our regulations under item 6. Significant impact, please listen as I say this, very important. Item 6, any activity which is likely to cause or has the potential to cause pollution of a wetland or watercourse. It's irrefutable that if a pollutant got in that detention basin, that it has the potential. Now, I don't know how high or low that potential is, but there is certainly a potential to cause pollution of a wetland or a watercourse. That is my concern. In my opinion, enough for a denial. And I do believe there to be prudent and feasible alternatives, removing numerous buildings from this project. But perhaps without going for a denial, I might say this application is incomplete. And I think there's some more work that the applicant could do. So please, I'd like to hear from other commission members if they feel that, which way we should go with that. Ms. Chantrell?
I'd just like to
Gary, go ahead. I know you had your hand up before.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I just want to clarify. So one of the adjacent property owners in which the catch basin in the road drains to across the street is owned by the state of Connecticut. We have York and Gates prisons and Bride Lake on that same property. I would note that we, based on the definition of a significant regulated activity, we held the public hearing and we closed the public hearing. The owner was well aware. Notice was sent to them by the applicant. In regards to the retention basin, the only thing I can comment on is it's been designed for the 100-year storm from the 2 to 100 years. So no, we didn't look beyond the 100 years at a 500-year storm. But I think in terms of the volume of water in a 100-year storm, that's 9 to 10 inches of rain. I mean, that's pretty significant. If that basin is going to hold it, that's not contributing to the downstream flooding, if there were to be any as a result. So I don't think it's going to overwhelm the catch basin in the road and exacerbate existing flooding in the road. In regards to the person who spoke at the public hearing, again, a local resident.
I believe that was Chris Haney. I believe, from my records, if I see Chris Haney, is that what that was?
My understanding is that they were a local resident and are speaking from historical personal knowledge. There's unfortunately, no other significant credential behind that. And just as an example, one comment I heard on that was, well, if the water was knee high, maybe he was 3 years old. So you have to put that into context when weighing, the professionals' review and the comments that were submitted into the record versus what you hear. And you have the right as commissioners to believe whomever you want. But typically I would just say, in the courts of law, those with, PE stamps behind their name and the soil scientist, the little SS, that kind of holds a lot of weight versus your average citizen, but that being said, even based on the site walk that the commission conducted, I didn't see what looked like evidence of floodplain areas on the site. I saw a very narrow and more of a ravine type geography in which that stream traveled. So I don't know that there's any flood zones associated with that. I didn't see any identified on the plans that were submitted. So from that perspective, I think in terms of the water, the historical flooding, I would question myself. And in regards to the significant regulated activity, it is in fact, we determined that and held a public hearing. So I don't know, if that's enough weight to deny it without prejudice and have them come back. But I would myself would tend to shy away from that. But that's all I have to say about that.
Understood. Keeping in mind, I hear what Mr. Gaishel's saying. A lot of my time has been spent with these Connecticut general statutes. I've been trying to memorize things in our regulations that we are working on, but also the ones we have. Unfortunately and fortunately, the gentleman that came forth, his comment is to be taken as evidence. Yes, it's true that soil scientists and engineers that work for the applicant are also supposed to be considered. It is our job to decide the validity of the evidence brought forth before us.
Correct.
So just keeping that in mind. Ms. Chantrell. Oh, unmute. Jen, you got her?
Okay, got it. So I agree with you, Gary Upton, about having impacts to the wetlands and water courses. I still just have a tough time with buildings I, J, and M. I think that it was stated that the water course, the wetland that's behind it, the small stream, is an impacted water source, and I still believe that there is going to be thermal pollution. I know that it was stated that clouds come before a rainstorm, but if you're driving around in the wintertime and there's a big snowstorm and you see snow on people's lawns, you don't see snow on their roofs. So throughout the year, there's a thermal impact from rooftops, and that water flowing off the rooftops is going to recharge the water course there. It's going to have asphalt from the roof degradation. It's going to have any kind of cleaning supplies for vinyl. I think that it will have a significant impact along that water course and wetland directly behind buildings I, J, and M. And I know that, I don't know if I've stated for the record, I don't know if we can add stuff to the record, but I am an environmental engineer. I have my BS in environmental engineering from the University of Connecticut, and I work for the DEM. So I think I know a little bit more than just your average Joe, and I do think that there is an impact from those rooftops recharging the water source.
So, Ms. Lindo, could we potentially pull up just so that in the event that someone's listening, the building letter names, Kristen Chantrell of the commission, could you tell me the building letter names one more time?
I, J, and M.
And could you describe their location on the lot? I believe they're the most westerly buildings, right?
The most westerly buildings. They run directly along the water course that's on the western side of the development.
Parallel to Bride Brook.
Yes.
Right? And they're the ones that it's been explained that there will be essentially, again, this imagining someone's only listening to us. There's approximately how many housing units in each one of those buildings, Gary Gaishel?
I think there's some have 10, some have 11.
So we have 3 buildings with 10 or 11 few thousand square foot.
What were the building numbers again?
There was I, J.
I, J, and M.
And these are the buildings that are within building I. There's at the north, you see building M. If anyone's watching, you'll see there's the serrated line. Building M there is in our upland review area, as is the driveway where it says 100-foot URA. That's the 100-foot upland review. Parking for cars, the cul-de-sac where it says R 50-foot. And then we're going to scroll down, if you don't mind, Jen.
Yep.
To building I. Looks like about 2/3 of that building is in our upland review area. And then we have building J in its entirety is in the upland review area, as are some of the parking spots and some of the driveway there at the most southern point. Is it, Ms. Chantrell, just to clarify, those are the buildings you're talking about?
Yes, those are the rooftops that are, the rain is going to be directed into the wetland or water course. Well, I should say, right, the flow of those buildings is to recharge the water course. They're not directly flowing into it. There's a small portion of overland flow before it reaches there, but I don't think that that portion is enough to remove what the naturally existing water is not replicated by rooftop runoff going into the water course.
Understood.
I think that there's a feasible alternative of removing those buildings up out of the upland review area, either by extending other buildings. I just think that there's other alternatives instead of putting those buildings that close and having the purpose of those rooftops to be recharging that water course.
And to be clear, I agree with that. I also think we had a little, Jen, if you could go up to the top of the plan above building F, we had a little discussion about this limit of proposed clearing. There was a section, if everyone remembers, the upper section where we couldn't tie in, please remind me, Gary Gaishel, this little bump out that we're avoiding. So we're threading this needle up here for buildings L and M and K because of this bump out from the sewer commission. Remind me, please.
Yeah, so the applicant did receive and provided the testimony that they received allocation from the Water and Sewer Commission. This dashed line that you see is the sewer shed boundary. And unfortunately, the Water and Sewer Commission is not willing to move that boundary so that we can adjust the development such that building M would be out of the regulated area. So until, I've had discussions with Brad Cargill. It's something that we may, as a town, take a look at in the future. But in regards to this application, they're not willing to move the boundary anytime soon, just as in general. So,
an application was made before this commission to do so?
To the Water and Sewer Commission, correct.
And it was made by the applicant?
That's my understanding, is the applicant made application for allocation.
No, did the applicant make an application to move the line?
No.
Okay. So I'd like to say to the commission, this to me, because there hasn't been an application to move the line, it speaks to a prudent and feasible alternative that potentially the applicant could go back and take those steps to potentially get out of the upland review area. Awesome. Whether or not they may or may not be granted that is outside of our purview.
I'd also say that this commission couldn't grant or condition the application and have that be predicated on the actions of another agency.
Agreed. Right, but again, perhaps
I would argue that it's not feasible and prudent because you're asking him to move a line. Yes, he hasn't applied for it, so maybe you could say you haven't exhausted all your municipal remedy. But I don't know. I'm talking. I'm just letting you know that the Water and Sewer Commission wasn't willing to move this line. That's why the plan is in its current configuration.
Right. Jen, do you mind taking away the screen share? I think unless anyone's got a question on that, so we can see everybody's lovely faces again. Thank you. So this parlays into, for me, we're going to have some discussion later if you look at the agenda on our regulations and obviously some other applications. But over the time that I've been at home, like everyone else, combing over our regs, it dawned on me, we always hear about the act, right? And I'm like, well, what is the act, right? Not to be silly, I'm like, the act is our regulations, and it is true, the act is our regulations. But by definition, I really said to myself, I wanted to comb over the intent of what we are doing as commissioner. And I hope not to put everyone to sleep because this is so bloody important. This is so bloody important. So I'm going to read to everyone in section 1 of our regulations. This is just discussion, but I'm hoping to get some more juices flowing on what we've been talking about. Section 1 of our regulations, which are copied, they're a direct copy from the 22A-36 of the Connecticut General Statutes, which is the act that we act upon. Is it all right with everyone if I read this in real quick? Yeah.
Sure.
All right. So, and everyone should have this. And if they're not familiar with it or they need help with the regulations, this is what we're here to do. The inland, wetlands, and watercourses of the state of Connecticut are an indispensable and irreplaceable but fragile natural resource with which the citizens of the state have been endowed. The wetlands and watercourses are an interrelated web of nature essential to an adequate supply of surface and underground water, to hydrological stability, and control of flooding and erosion, to the recharging and purification of groundwater, and to the existence of many forms of animal, aquatic, and plant life. Many inland wetlands and watercourses have been destroyed or are in danger of destruction because of unregulated use by reason of the deposition, filling, or removal of material, the diversion or obstruction of water flow, the erection of structures, and other uses, all of which have despoiled, polluted, and eliminated wetlands and watercourses. Such unregulated activity has had and will continue to have a significant adverse impact on the environment and ecology of the state of Connecticut, and has and will continue to imperil the quality of the environment, thus adversely affecting the ecological, scenic, historic, and recreational values and benefits of the state for its citizens now and forevermore. Okay, fun story, right? I'm going to keep going on. I'm going to get to the good parts. The preservation and protection of the wetlands and watercourses from random, unnecessary, undesirable, and unregulated uses, disturbances, or destruction is in the public interest and is essential to the health, welfare, and safety of the citizens of the state. It is therefore the purpose of these regulations, being our regulations that back us, all the rules that we all sit here citing. It is the purpose of these regulations to protect the citizens of the state by making provisions for the protection, preservation, maintenance, and use of the inland wetlands and watercourses, by minimizing their disturbance and pollution. This part is where I got interested. I said, oh, listen to what this says. Maintaining and improving water quality in accordance with the highest standards set by federal, state, or local authority, preventing damage from erosion, turbidity, or siltation, preventing loss of fish and other beneficial aquatic organisms, wildlife and vegetation, and the destruction of the natural habitats thereof, deterring and inhibiting the danger of flood and pollution, protecting the quality of wetlands and watercourses for their conservation, economic, aesthetic, recreational, and other public and private uses and values, and protecting the state's potable fresh water supplies from dangers of drought, overdraft, pollution, misuse, and mismanagement by providing an orderly process to balance the need for the economic growth of the state and the use of its land with the need to protect its environment and ecology in order to forever guarantee to the people of the state the safety of such natural resources for their benefit and enjoyment, and for the benefit and enjoyment of generations yet unborn. So that gets me emotional, actually, when I read it. I'm like, wow, that's a charge. That is a serious charge. As it's been brought to my attention, we're not an environmental activist agency, obviously. We are here to, preside over these applications. But I think it's important to listen to some of the words in there, and I would recommend that all the commissioners take the time to really familiarize yourself. I know they get bloody boring, but these regulations, this is our rule book. It doesn't matter what attorney comes before us and tells us, oh, you can't consider animals, or well, you have to consider the land before the animals, and all these little word games that are done, right? And I want to be very clear, that is not a statement made to any of the applicant's attorneys. That is to be very clear. But these are things we've heard over time, and I feel that's potentially, there's been a potential situation of misleading the commission to misunderstand these regulations. So I'm just throwing that out there. I know I'm talking a lot and I apologize. Please, someone else interject. But again, maintaining and improving water quality in accordance with the highest standards set by federal, state, or local authority. This is our regulation. This is not new evidence that I'm bringing. I'm saying you need to consider that for every application. An applicant cannot say that we can't consider our regulations when approving them or not approving them. That is why I would, again, continue on the vein of either a denial or, as Mr. Schmidt began us, thank you, Dave, for starting this line, taking us down the line of potentially saying a denial with no prejudice.
So if I may, Gary, I just want to point out that is section 1.1, title and authority.
Yes, sir.
And again, I go back to that sentence mid-paragraph. It is therefore the purpose of the regulations to protect the citizens, right? Et cetera, going on. And by making provisions, I believe the making provisions for the protection and preservation of these things is through the regulations and the adoption of the regs themselves. That would be my interpretation, that the regs themselves provide that mechanism for the protection and the preservation and the maintenance, et cetera. That's my interpretation of the regs. So then you have to go through the regs and look at the activity that's occurring within the upland review area or the wetland, the water course.
Hold for a minute before we digress too far.
And look at section 10.1.
Gary, could you hold, please?
Yeah.
I appreciate you speaking in favor of the applicant, but there's clarity we need to have here.
I just want to clarify with you, Mr. Chair, I'm not speaking in favor of the applicant or against. That is clear.
Okay.
Don't insinuate, please.
Again, section 17, commission, conflict and severance. Let me clarify, you should read this again. If there is a conflict among the provisions of these regulations, to show you the intent of these regulations, if there is a conflict among the provisions of these regulations, the provision which imposes the most stringent standards for the use of wetlands and watercourses shall govern. I'm not making these words up. Those are your regulations.
I know. But considerations, section 10, considerations for a decision. That's what you would evaluate. And you can apply the highest standards in the land, federal, state, local, whatever that may be.
Yes.
But we don't have a provision for, quote, water quality other than what's been handed down by the DEP in the 2004 Water Quality Manual, the report from the applicant's engineer, and reviewed by the town engineer state that the application as designed has met the 2004 Water Quality Manual. So I would be remiss to advise the commission that they're not taking those provisions. But you don't have to agree with me.
So in reading section 10, so that we have a clarity for everybody, I hate to do this to you, but I've been spending so much time doing this. The agency may consider the following making its decision on an application: the application and supporting documentation, reports from other agencies and commissions, including but not limited to the town of East Lyme, Commission for the Conservation of Natural Resources, planning, zoning, or planning and zoning commissions, the building official, like Mr. Gaishel mentioned, director of public works, or a town engineer, specifically Mr. Gaishel mentions, Ledge Light Health District, but is not limited to these. The agency may also consider comments on an application from the New London County Soil and Water Conservation District, the Southeastern Regional Planning Agency, or other regional organizations, council or elected officials, agencies in adjacent municipalities which may be affected by the proposed activity, or other technical agencies or organizations which may undertake additional studies or investigations. Further, non-receipt of comments from the state agencies and commissions listed in subdivision 10.1b and C above within the prescribed time shall neither delay nor prejudice the decision of the agency. What that means, if in my interpretation, if we sent for review from the commissioner and we didn't hear back, it doesn't let us hold up the application. And item E, for an application for which a public hearing is held, public comments, evidence, and testimony. It does not, item E does not preclude item A, B, C, and D, all of which are to be utilized by our agency in the process for making a decision.
Correct. And then 10.2 is your criteria for making that decision based on that information.
Yep.
So I would just point back to, we have the record, public hearing's been closed. So whatever materials have been submitted into the record is what we have to go on to make a decision. So section 10.2, A through F would be the criteria that I would recommend the commission use to render that decision. And that speaks to relationships between short and long-term impacts, irreversible and irretrievable losses of wetlands and watercourse resources. It also speaks to the character and degree of injury to or interference with the safety, health, or reasonable use of the property, which is caused or threatened by the proposed regulated activities. So there's a number of things that the commission needs to consider in rendering a decision.
I think an important piece that doubles back from the preamble that I gave everyone from section 1 that is in that section that Gary just cited, again, is to maintain or enhance existing environmental quality. It does not say you can marginally degrade the environment. It doesn't say you can sort of cut some trees down. It says maintain or enhance existing environmental quality. So, you know, this is, again, I've spent a lot of time with this. This stuff is up for interpretation. That is why we exist. That's why we all sit here and argue this out. Sorry, Gary, I didn't mean to jump at you like that.
No, that's fine. I would just also note that while it says those things, it also says that you can fill wetlands as well.
Yep, it does.
So keeping that in mind, that's why we're here, right?
In the past, when we've filled wetlands, what's the rate we've replaced them at? Because this was a question that I know one of the commissioners had at some point. When we filled a wetland like Costco.
Historically, there's never been a set standard. I think the rule of thumb now is a 1-to-1 ratio.
Okay.
So you're filling in wetlands at a 1-to-1 ratio. So, for instance, Costco used an area in a flood hazard zone. They had to provide some additional compensation area for the Army Corps, right? So they offset that with a 1-to-1. But we haven't, in our regulations, established a specific guideline there. It would be my professional recommendation, a 1-to-1 ratio.
Didn't we do like a 2-to-1 thing with which application came through? Maybe it was Gateway. Gateway came through. I think they had given us a calculation of lost wetland, and I believe it was a 2-to-1 replacement that you had cited from, I thought it was from Deep or somebody. I can't remember.
I'd have to go back and look. I don't recall.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So anyway, guys, we're here to make a decision or further discuss this. We've had a few good jumping off points of the denial with no prejudice, denial with whatever reasons we might find. There's been, can we investigate? It sounds like we can't. We could, in fact, waste some money and time and have someone take a look, and we cannot enter that into the record. That makes sense to me. I think if I were an applicant, I'd understand that I don't want you to go and now do some more work and have it without me being able to comment on. Procedurally, we are also in a funny place because of COVID. And we do appreciate the patience of the applicant on this particular project and all projects. So do we have some other questions or concerns, please? Anybody?
Let's see. Doreen.
Hi, Doreen. We're unmuting you.
Okay.
There you are. Hi, Doreen.
Oh my goodness. No, you have to go away. I'm sorry. My daughter just came downstairs, of course.
10, 11, 12, 13, 14, which one?
Yeah. Go back upstairs. Hold on. I'm sorry. Okay. So I just had a point that I was thinking of as we were discussing about the runoff that's coming off of the roofs and stuff. Can someone just refresh my memory? Like, were there calculations or anything to figure out how much water is actually going from, because there's that huge ridge that goes right down there that these buildings are going to be built into, and so was there any way to figure out how much water is actually going down into the wetlands from that? Because yes, they're gonna take runoff from the roofs to recharge the wetlands, and there's obviously some water that's going to go down there, but when we walked the site, there was that huge ridge that it seems like most of the water would go the other direction, but
so
like a hydrologist's job, but was there anything, I'm trying to remember that how they were able to calculate those numbers of like the, that, I don't know, am I making sense?
Can I answer your question, Doreen?
Yeah.
So I believe the engineer of record, he, through his stormwater report, he calculated that area and the volume of water that would be hitting that without pre-development. And then what they're doing is they're diverting the roof runoff through the leaders back to the stream to provide that same volume of water that would normally have fell pre-development.
Okay.
So, and Ms. Chantrell's concern was that runoff would be thermally polluted and also be carrying bits of asphalt from the shingles. So maybe she can clarify. She put her hand up.
No, I actually had a question about that. So he calculated the rainfall rate on the ground in that area, not necessarily the hydrological flows of the water.
Well,
I mean, it just so if you're just calculating how much rainfall hits that area, you're not really taking into consideration the groundwater that's also feeding into that stream. So if you're changing the hydrology of the land by blasting and putting in those buildings, then if you're just looking at rain rates specifically, then you could be putting a lot less water into that water course than currently goes. Is that kind of what you were saying too, Doreen, like along those lines?
Yes, but I guess, my thought is, these are like, this is rock, so it's not, there's not really going to be infiltration. So maybe their calculations are correct if you're just using rainfall onto the ground, because it's just hitting like bedrock, and then flowing from there. So there's not much going through the ground.
They use a runoff coefficient, otherwise called a curve number, composite curve number. And they're calculated based on a wooded area, quote, in good condition within HSGB. I'm not sure what that means, but our town engineer reviewed it. A composite of CN, which is the curve number, of 55 was used for both watersheds. So there's 2 watersheds on the site. That rock ledge that we saw on the site walk, that is literally the drainage divide. One half goes to the east, the other half goes to the west from that drainage divide, that ridge. So there's 2 drainage basins in which he determined these calculations. The record, I would just, maybe Kristen, if you can take a look at the report, you may have more background than I do to decipher that. I just rely typically on the town engineer's response and his review.
Doesn't this report that's filed primarily focus on the detention, and detention is proposed to attenuate and increase? This is primarily focused on the detention basin. I don't see where it talks much about the riprap on the back of the buildings. I could be wrong, but I have it in, I believe I have, it's from YRC, Yantic River Stormwater Management Report. You're referring to the same thing, right?
Correct.
We've got the flows and the curve and the quality and treatment, but most of this document, unless I'm mistaken, primarily refers to the detention basin. And the Rosemary, I see, will be right there. This was the point of contention that I had with Attorney Heller and Brandon, is I was finding that what they were entering in the record as evidence was conflicting. I found that there was a conflict of statement for water, the shed line, and the water that was going west and the water that was going east. And it wasn't clear to me. I know the record shows that if people look there, it wasn't clear to me what they were really saying. We ended up just, I think we conceded on having a heated argument, but there wasn't much clarity. Sorry, Ms. Ostfeld. Yeah, she's muted. You're muted. Sorry. Jen, you got her?
Yep. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Rosemary.
so just in reference to the curve number, so, okay, if he's using the assumption that it's woods in good condition and there's minimal impervious areas, can you just explain to me really quickly which soil group he was using again? Because there's 4 different types you can use. You can use A, B, C, or D. And if you were to say choose A, that gives you a very different curve than if you were to use D. And that's where there can be a lot of variation in the data that you're looking at based on the assumptions of your model.
I'm going to guess that that's GB.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Say that again?
You use B.
B.
Soil group B.
Okay.
Says the curve number, same methodology as pre-developed conditions. Composite curve number CN were calculated based on the land cover types for the proposed residential site for HSGB soils, including buildings and impervious surfaces, CN 98, open spaces, CN 61, and remaining wooded areas, CN 55. A composite CN of 71 was calculated for PR-01 and 56 for PR-02. It's like a bedtime story, isn't it? Sorry, bad joke. So the question there, is the question answered?
Yeah, if he's using B, that answers my question.
All right. So does anyone else have any other discussion? Does everyone understand what a prudent feasible alternative is? This is procedural stuff for us that's going to both educate us now on this application and every other application. You know, we are parlaying again this into our regulation discussion later. Just wanted to take the time to do this stuff together.
Oh, wait, hold on.
You're unmuted.
Okay. Go ahead, it's fine.
We're going to mute you. So any other comments, questions, concerns from the commission? Mr. Knowles, thank you for your patience. Anyone else, anything? Okay. Our recording secretary, Sue Spang, would like to say something. Hi, Sue.
Hi, Gary. Just a procedural question. I noticed on your last motion, alternates voted. Is that something you usually do, or is that something you're going to?
Say that again.
On your last motion for the minutes, you had alternates vote, and I hadn't noticed that before. So is that something that you want to do?
Yeah, if an alternate's seated, they do vote. And we had done that, I believe, with Doreen because of Ted stepping away.
But everybody voted. There was other alternates that voted that were not seated. That's why I'm asking.
Right.
Okay,
Sandy and Doreen both voted before Ted stepped down, so.
I'm just asking, just for the minutes, if that's what you want to continue to do.
No,
Okay.
no, we don't. The alternates that aren't seated should not be voting.
Okay. Thank you.
So to clarify for someone listening, because even I'm getting a little bit lost, if we were to have a vote one way or another, this evening's voting commission would be, as you understand it, Ms. Spang, we would have, who would vote?
The members and whoever was seated.
Doreen is the only alternate currently seated.
Doreen for this particular application.
Okay, good. Makes sense to me. Mr. Schmidt, do you have anything else you'd like to add? No? Doreen, anything else you'd like to add or question? We could ask you and then your kid would come down right now. Ms. Gentry?
I think I just want to reiterate that it was stated in the meeting by one of the presenters that there was going to be an impact from the rooftops, and it was up to us to determine if it was significant enough. And I think that the fact that there is an impact on an already degraded water source is reason for either a feasible and prudent alternative or conditions to move buildings. You know where I stand about the rooftops.
Okay. Could you clarify just one more time where you stand?
The rooftops will impact the water course and wetlands in a negative way, and those buildings need to go.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Chantrell. Ms. Sandy, do you have any comments or questions?
I was wondering in regard to when we approve an application and these construction begins, or how, is there a way to follow up? We have inspections that go forth and make sure that these regulations are being followed.
That goes to Mr. Gaishel.
Yeah, if this application was approved and these policies were accepted, you know, what they were doing, there's got to be a procedure that they're being followed and done properly, and a way of testing the water or following through that, you know, or ways to correct if it isn't being done properly. I know I'm not voting because I'm not seated, but that was my thought, that there must be a way to follow up.
Mr.
Or how the town does
to
that.
answer that, just for the whole commission, as your agent, I'm your enforcement officer. So
Right.
I do routine inspections on various sites. In the past, we've conditioned applications with on-site monitors and that requirement. Usually,
So it's monitored and enforced.
Yes.
Right.
And technically, per our regs, we could revoke or suspend permission or a permit for its activity if someone didn't comply with anything we set forth as an approval.
Right.
Correct.
That's section 14.5 if you want some boring reading. Moving right to left on my screen, Mr. Phi, do you have any questions? Sorry, Sandy, does that conclude what you were asking?
Yeah, no, that answered, Gary answered that well. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Phi, we're going to unmute you. Ready? Or maybe unmute, mute. There you go. You're good.
Hey, good evening. Yeah, I have no questions.
Okay. That was easy.
Yeah.
And Rosemary, also, I'm not going to forget Phyllis. Sorry, Phyllis. I wish I could see you, Phyllis. Rosemary, what do you got for us?
I have no further questions.
Okay. Phyllis, how are you?
Oh, I'm fine. It's certainly a lot of interesting discussions this evening. I would like to make a motion that perhaps we could vote.
Okay. Yeah, I think we should. I think the time has come. I think we've exhausted all discussion. Wouldn't you agree, Madam Secretary?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Well, where are we standing, guys? Are we voting on a denial because unprejudiced denial because of things we don't feel are completed, and we want them to take a whack at it again in the right manner for information we've not been provided? Are we denying because we feel that they're going to pollute the environment? We will draft this language for whatever, or are we approving this situation? Was that an official motion, Ms. Berger? Do you have a motion you'd like to make?
I would just like to make a motion that we vote.
Okay.
And maybe Gary can give us some direction. So I just don't want to have anybody misled on anything as far as the vote. Are you giving us the options?
I mean, for example, I could say I make a motion to deny this application with no prejudice, and we would we would have a vote on that.
All right. So I guess I can make a motion that we make a motion to deny this application without prejudice.
And just to clarify, do we feel that that is because there are incomplete pieces? I do not want to put words in your mouth for the motion.
Yes.
Okay.
Because I think there's other things to look into to see if maybe something can be changed, or at least one of the buildings that's in the upland review area be eliminated or moved. And then there's, a number of other issues also.
Could you restate the motion, please?
Say that. Sorry, Sue. Say that again.
Could she restate the motion? please.
Okay, Phyllis, would you like me to help you put it together? And please stop me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, why don't you put it together? Because it's really hard to sit here on a telephone.
Right. I believe Ms. Berger is stating that we are she's made a motion to deny this application with no prejudice, as suggested previously and discussed by Mr. Schmidt, because we feel there are numerous pieces here that are incomplete and further investigation needs to be done regarding those pieces. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
All right. So that we have a motion. Do we hear a second?
Before you continue, Mr. Chair, Sue,
Yes, sir.
are you clear on that motion?
Yeah, there was, I'm wondering if there was a little bit added in there, to deny the application without prejudice because the application is incomplete. Is that basically what you want to say?
In its essence.
Incomplete, but I want to know why it's incomplete. The missing pieces. The
Right.
applicant will want to know.
It's my understanding that we can put the wording for the denial together for the record after the meeting. Is that true, Mr. Gaishel?
No.
Part of the motion.
It's part of your motion. You're voting now if that's the case. Now, if you want to delay your vote, you have 65 days to render a decision. You can direct me to draft a motion.
Okay. But so basically you want some more, my opinion is that the missing pieces are.
Was the building that could be relocated or moved or eliminated.
And
that's what I heard, but I want to be clear on that that's in the minutes.
And the detention pond and its outflow onto another property is my concern. That is my chief incomplete concern. And if anyone wants to stop me on that and say, no, it's, that's, but that is.
I would just, well, the outflow with the onto an adjacent property, I would say is not within the jurisdiction of the wetland agency unless the adjacent property has wetlands, which we know there's Bride Lake. So you have to tie the two together.
Okay. Well, I see.
It does.
I see.
Because to say, it just drains to an adjacent parcel, well, that's just a civil matter.
It's the adjacent parcel, which also includes, 43% of the town's drinking water.
Correct.
That's it.
Does that make sense, Sue?
And there's a lot of thoughts there, but it would be hard for me to write that into a motion just because there's been a few people talking to what they feel. So I think I'd be more comfortable with a clear motion as to why it's incomplete. If you could state that specifically, I think that would make more sense.
Could I suggest that instead of Phyllis making the motion, that Chairman Upton, you make the motion?
That's fine. That way I'm not concocting. I understood the intent.
Yes.
Our secretary said, hey guys, let's vote.
Right.
So yeah, the motion is, and Mr. Gaishel, maybe you could help me here, to deny the application with no
prejudice.
With no prejudice.
As you found it incomplete.
The reasons for incompletion are
building, I think it was I, J, and M could either be relocated or eliminated. And the potential water quality impacts of the stormwater runoff leaving the site.
Yep.
From the retention pond.
Leaving the site from the retention pond on the southeast corner.
And there is also no hydrologist on this project.
And the lack of a hydrologist or a hydrology report. Again, I believe it's the commission's intent here not to give a sweeping denial, but this is discussion, but it seems this motion is to say, hey, you need to do some more homework for us. Am I putting words in mouths, or is that how we feel?
No, but I want to make sure that they're clear as to when they reapply, because I anticipate them reapplying if this goes forward with a denial. They're going to address all of these issues.
Right. Does anyone else have any other issues? So that in fairness, we can't tell the applicant what to do and how to do what they're doing, but in fairness to them, we need to say, even if we denied for, we found that we're just denying because we don't, there's issues, factual evidence of pollution. our feasible and prudent alternatives are recommendations. We need to give them, in this situation with no prejudice, we need to give them these recommendations. Do we feel that the ones we've given are sufficient? Yeah.
I think we need to be extremely specific. I mean, we need to be very specific about why we're denying it. We can't be vague at all.
Yes. That was, for the record, that was Dave Schmidt, a committee member.
Okay, so the motion that I have is you're going to deny it without prejudice because the application is incomplete, as you believe several of the buildings can be moved or eliminated, and that you need additional information regarding the water quality leaving the detention pond at the southern end of the site, and the lack thereof of a hydrology report.
And I think Kristen had made the point, just wanting further information about the water that's going to be going into the water body on the western part of the site from the roofs.
Presuming those buildings were still there.
Yeah.
So more information on the water quality runoff from buildings I, J, and M, if they remain, right?
Yeah, to be clear, I don't think those buildings should remain because I don't think the rooftop runoff with asphalt and thermal pollution, et cetera, should be running into a wetland or water course.
That's good. Thanks for clarifying.
Understood.
Okay.
Sue, do you feel clear on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just need a second.
I'll second.
Second, sorry, is coming from Kristen Chantrell, the Vice Chair of the Inland Wetland Agency.
Got it. Thank you.
Any further discussion or questions from any of the voting commission members? Please, if you have a question, put your hand up. This is the time for discussion. Okay, we've got a question from Doreen Ryan. Hi, Doreen.
Hi. I was just curious, this is more, I guess, procedural, but so if we were to vote and go ahead with this denial, then the applicant would go and try and maybe hire a hydrologist or try to check off the boxes of the things of why we denied it, and then come back.
They may, yeah.
I think procedurally, what I would anticipate is if this was to be denied without prejudice, the applicant will file an appeal. Then they'll resubmit an application to address these issues. And most likely, if that application gets approved with these issues addressed, they'll withdraw their appeal. That's kind of the process. But
that's what we've seen before.
Or
right?
if they make changes to their plan, and let's say that second plan gets approved, but we had to eliminate buildings I, J, and M, and they want I, J, and M, they're going to keep their appeal out there. And most likely the decision that would come down, let's just say the courts vote in favor of it, they would remand it back to the commission for action. So at some level, you would see it back again that way, potentially. So just know that's kind of the outline process. It's rudimentary, but.
Does that make sense, Doreen?
Yes.
They kind of throw a thing out there to kind of, have an appeal, but then reapply, and they kind of work both angles at the same time, is what Gary just basically explained. What we've seen before.
But it's again, that's legal.
Yep.
So.
Did Phyllis try to say something?
Oh, hi, Phyllis.
No, I think I'm all set. Thank you.
And I just want to make sure I did make the motion, but I was I was buttressing what Phyllis was trying to do through the phone. Thank you, Phyllis. And let me know if I covered what you were looking for. I suppose the best way to do that, guys, is to say that if there's no further discussion on this motion to deny without prejudice with some items that we feel that are insufficient, or I forget the exact wording, what Ms. Spang will have, I'd like to bring it to a vote, please. And I'm going to go through you guys one at a time. And I'm going to, myself, I'm going to procedurally here, this is a bit more poignant than we've done in the past, but because I'm the Chair, I'll start. Obviously, I made the motion, so I'm going to say aye in favor of the motion. I'm Gary Upton. And we're going to go down to the Vice Chair, Ms. Chantrell. Could we have your vote, please, Ms. Chantrell?
Yes, Kristen Chantrell, yes with the motion.
Okay, and then moving down to Ms. Berger as the secretary. If we could have your vote, please, Ms. Berger.
Yeah, Phyllis Berger, yes, to the motion.
So Phyllis, Kristen, Mike. And so here, I'm going to just run down from the top as it looks at this point. Jen, stop me if I'm doing anything wrong, but I'm just going to run down from the top. On my screen, I see Jen, myself, Sue, Gary, and next would be Rosemary. Rosemary, if you could give us your vote, please.
Aye.
Your full name, Rosemary Osfeld. You're voting.
Osfeld, aye.
Aye. You're voting in favor of the motion. Moving on from Rosemary to Mr. Phi, Don Fiminster, if I'm saying it correctly, sir.
That's right, yeah.
And your vote for this motion, Don.
Don Fimister voting aye for
Thank
this
you,
motion.
sir. Kristen, we're skipping you. You've already gone. Sandy, we are not taking your vote on this, correct? Because you are sitting as an alternate and you weren't here before on this stuff. Mr. Schmidt, we're moving on to you in the Everglades over there. We could hear you.
I would vote aye.
Okay, and again in favor of the motion made. And Doreen Ryan, we are here asking you your vote, please.
Doreen Ryan, I vote aye.
Okay, are there any commission members which did not feel that they were able to vote? Okay, the ayes have it. There are no nays. Thank you, everybody. We're going to move on from this point. After making the motion on the North Bridebrook multifamily development for application of Paz and Construction LLC, Jason Pizzaglia, applicant Paz and Construction LLC, owner, to conduct regulated activities in the upland review area in association with a proposed multifamily residential community on property identified in the application as N Bridebrook Road, East Lyme, Assessors Map 09.0, Lot 37-2, period. That is the conclusion of public hearing and voting and discussion on this application. Today's date is Monday, May 18th. It's 8:43 p.m. This application was made, just for the record, because of COVID concerns. This application was made in person. Public hearing was conducted in person. All of these things were done in the town hall. The only part of this application that was done remotely here by Zoom was tonight's meeting. Thank you, everybody. We're going to move on to the next part of the application. And if I were a representative or a person from that application, we appreciate you being here, but we won't be offended if you want to go home. Thank you, guys. Item B of pending applications.
Right.
Oh, sorry, Dorian.
Can I
didn't
say
hear that.
something? Yes,
Hi.
I'm gonna recluse myself and let Ted come back.
Okay.
Is that good?
You're recusing yourself from the next application, or just you're getting out of here, and we're gonna say you're stepping down and we're filling your seat with Ted.
I'm gonna sit and listen, but Ted can come back on because I don't think you need me.
Hi, Ted.
Hello, Mr. Upton.
How are you, sir?
Super.
I hope you didn't sit and listen to all that.
No comment.
He's a lawyer.
Excellent. All right. So item B under pending applications, the application of Toby and Glenn Knowles, the owners, for the proposed construction of a patio, correction of water runoff, and wetland restoration at property identified as 21 Brightwater Road, Niantic, East Lyme, Assessors Map 5.19, Lot 58. Hello, Mr. Knowles. Thank you for your ridiculous amount of patience with us with this application that we've gone on and on and on about. Our commission does apologize, I know, for the time it's taken to process this, and we understand what you're trying to accomplish. I'm going to say at this point, unless Gary Gaisel needs to interject.
I just want to make sure, did everyone have a chance to read my memorandum on this particular? There was a letter that was addressed to Toby and Glenn Knowles regarding the history here. What I went ahead and did is I issued an administrative permit for the work in the upland area so that he could begin his project. But because I am unable to, based on the regulations, issue the permit for the work in the wetlands, we had to wait until this meeting in which you can get an approval possibly to go forward. So that's where we're here today. So I just wanted you to know that he does have a permit to conduct the upland regulated activities.
Does anybody have, of the commission, any glowing concerns for this matter, this application? If you do, please, or you'd like to speak about it in any regard, whether for or against, please, now is the time. Let's just have it out for a second.
I do.
Who's that?
It's Phyllis.
Hi, Phyllis, go for it. Phyllis Berger here.
Okay, so I recall at the last meeting, we had some questions about the tree that was cut down. And I think I was one of the people that mentioned something about whether it could just be, the stump could be chopped or dug out. And I think the applicant at that point wanted to dig it out. So I guess my question is to Gary Dachel. Is he being allowed to dig it out opposed to having the stump ground down?
I have not discussed that with the applicant, and I don't know that the applicant has gone forward with any activity as of yet. So I would ask Mr. Knowles if he could maybe comment on that.
Yes, my name is Glenn Knowles. I'm 21 Brightwater Road. We have, since we did get the approval for the upland area, which that tree stump was in, we had hired Brandon Hyde from Hyde Park Landscape to take a look at that area, and he was able to ground it out. So we did
ground it.
We did ground it. Yes.
Oh, good.
Good.
That was definitely
Good.
the commission's. That's good news, isn't it? That's what we had preferred anyway. So that's great.
That was my recommendation, to not disturb the soils as well.
Thank you, Brandon.
You're welcome.
Okay, and then I have a second question. Is on the application, it said that there would be fill is needed 20 to 30 cubic yards. It seems like that's a lot to put in that small area, particularly with a patio.
If I could speak on that.
Yep.
Okay, that's actually in the upland review area, not in the wetland area. That's for the lawn up near the house on the right and left side of the house. And
Again, speaking as Brandon Hyde, he's done the contracting work for Mr. Knowles, correct?
Thank you, Mr. Upton. Yes, Brandon Hyde with Hyde Park. Thank you.
So to get a concept of that 20 to 30 yards, what are we talking for elevation change? You know, have you put in 4 feet of dirt all over the property? Have you smoothed out a 16-inch grade? What could you clarify for us, Mr. Hyde?
Sure can. We're basically using on-site materials to create a soft gradient, so the water can naturally flow into that wetland area. We do need to top dress so that we can establish good grass, a turf on each side of the house. That's the purpose of the soil. It's basically a small top dress.
Looks like Ms. Chantrell had a question.
Yeah, so the soil that's going to be applied on both sides of the house, is your intention to have the water pervade down to be directed towards the wetlands for the wetlands absorption, or to be absorbed by the grass that sits on both sides of the house?
Yeah, I would hope that by establishing good turf, a certain amount of the water can be absorbed and filtered through the grass area. I apologize. And didn't think anyone would call at 9 o'clock at night at the office. And then from there, any water that does go into the wetland would be absorbed into the wetland plant area.
Okay.
So kind of, it sounds like he's saying a combination of the two.
Yes, that's correct. We're hoping by establishing good turf there, that the majority of water can be absorbed. The surface water that falls on the side of each house can be absorbed in the turf. But the gradient does go towards the wetland in the back, naturally.
So if I asked a pointed question, if I may, if you were to be filling what's the in changing an elevation of, say, current standing elevation and filled elevation, what's the maximum amount of dirt by measurement of foot?
I'm sorry, my phone keeps ringing. I don't know why. Hold on.
Well, they just saw you online. They're like, everyone's like, hey, let's go Hyde Park.
Yeah, apparently. Okay, 1 second, please.
Maybe Mr. Knowles, can you answer that question?
Yeah, the grade that we have to change it is probably no more than 7 or 8 inches.
Okay.
So basically, we have to build up by the house and then actually trim down as it goes towards the wetlands as it gets closer. That's the problem now, is that it actually goes up towards the wetlands and it forms an area where all the water just puddles. Yes, so the water comes from my neighbor's house from which way is that? The west, and it comes down, and then it kind of just sits there and forms a puddle. So we're trying to build up a little bit and then trim it down as it goes into the wetlands, so that if there is any runoff, it does head towards the wetlands.
So in the section where you're trimming off, and I'm just trying to make sure I get the answer that Ms. Berger, I believe she asked, in the section where you're reducing elevation or flattening the land, how much are you removing?
I think it was like 5 or 6 inches.
Okay, so we're essentially leveling out flattish ground and giving it a little tip to the wetland.
Correct. And then you have to, towards the eastern side of the property where the patio is going to be, is you're going to have to raise that up about 7 or 8 inches to make the patio flat.
And which will keep you out of the wetland, like I said, or the wet grass. So is it loam and process coming in here?
It's screen loam that's being used. Screen loam, native source.
Underneath the patio, I imagine you're going to put some process and some.
That's actually crushed stone. We're using an open aggregate instead of a process to allow for more water retention underneath the patio. Okay. That was the purpose of that. Similar to a permeable paver base is what we're using.
Gotcha. With a landscape matting underneath it or something?
There's actually no matting. There's a type of geogrid material.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Does anyone else have any questions? Would anyone like to make a motion to make a decision on this application? Ms. Chantrell?
I'll make a motion to approve the application.
I can second.
We've got a motion.
Rosemary Oswald seconding.
Yep, Rosemary second. Kristen has made the motion. And at this point, we're going to take a vote from the commission, one by one, starting at the top. I am in favor of this. That's an aye from myself. Ms. Chantrell made the motion. Your vote is
aye.
And from left to right. Rosemary Osfeld.
Rosemary, aye.
Mr. Fye. Well, let's unmute. We need to hear his voice. Don Fimminster.
I vote support, yes.
Okay. Sandy.
Yes, I vote in support.
Okay. Mr. Schmidt.
Aye.
And
Schmidt, aye.
And let me see, Mr. Koch.
Aye.
And Mrs. Berger.
Aye.
It appears everyone is in favor of this application. Mr. Knowles, we would just ask that you obviously do a nice job and respect the environment and enjoy your new patio.
Hold on.
Hold on a minute. Gary's saying things.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sandy voted.
Sandy's not seated.
Not seated.
Oh, okay. We're going to take away one of the ayes. We only have 72 ayes now, not 73.
Okay.
It's still unanimous.
Yes,
Yeah.
unanimous in
Okay.
favor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, guys.
All
Take care.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Here we are. It's 9 o'clock almost. The next item of business is new business. And we're going to take a whack here at some discussion regarding the regulations for our Inland Wetlands Agency. So where are we at with this, guys? This is like a 27-year project. Not really, but it's something that was started by the last agencies. Numerous people. They had even had a subcommittee that's worked on this. The past chairman, Cheryl, last name Gary, I'm forgetting.
Lazanoff.
Lazanoff had made some serious amount of work, it seems, on the revisions for the regulations. So here we are, we're talking about the inland wetland regulations, the very things that govern our commission to do the things we've been doing thus far all evening and all year. What do we got?
Now, I know this was long awaited and has been a little bit, but I would, at this point, I'd be wondering if the commission would be so willing to entertain putting this as item D and moving the other items up and address Mr. I get the name right. Mr. Kennedy, who's representing 21 Marshfield and Creek Road, as well as the Nottingham Hills re-subdivision, maybe before the inland wetlands, because I think that discussion will take much, much longer than these folks really would want to wait.
Well, we're going to be looking at, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 things before we get back to the regulations.
Correct. So in regards to the regulations, I mean, being that we're on the topic, the big ticket items, increasing the wetland review area to 200 feet and dividing the permit process into 3 types of permits: minor, intermediate, and significant. Those are the 2 big major changes. There's a handful of clerical changes, and there's some other substantive stuff as well in there. It's pretty much a complete overhaul of the regulation. So it does take parts from different communities across the state of Connecticut. So I would be anticipating that the commission would probably just direct me to schedule up a public hearing for discussion. If you want to have continued discussion on the regulations just amongst yourselves, you're more than entitled to do so. The one thing I thought, may be worth consideration is when we, in the planning process, and we approve subdivisions, when there are wetlands on a site that's being subdivided, right? We know that they're required, the applicant's required to bring that application before the agency for either a determination or a report to the planning agency. Typically, that report takes the form of a permit. In the cases when it takes the form of a permit, what historically is the process is the applicants have to come back and apply for individual permits on each lot, most likely, and usually with the agency. My thought is to reduce my feeling is that's just cumbersome, and it's double redundancy. So why not allow the applicant to come back and reapply and just have it be an administrative approval? Because you've already seen the site, you've already approved the subdivision, and you already considered the activities that were going to be made inevitable. So my thought is if the agent could issue those permits just to speed the process along, that would be maybe a beneficial thing. But aside from that, that's the only other comment I had on this draft. So if the commission so chooses, we can schedule a public hearing. I got Kristen and Rosemary.
Kristen,
Yeah,
you
I'm
go.
sorry, can you just clarify? You're talking about if there's a re-subdivision application or a subdivision application, one or the other?
Either or. If there's wetlands on the site, the applicant's required to get a determination or a permit, right, for any regulated activities. If there's, what the subdivision and the statute say is that we have to send that re-subdivision application or the subdivision to the wetland agency for a report. So the applicant's required to go get a report from the agency. And then that report gets furnished to the planning commission before they can make a decision.
I think that procedure should stay in place.
It does. That procedure doesn't move. It's once the planning commission approves the subdivision plan or the re-subdivision, whatever it may be, and that gets filed. Let's say we had wetlands on a parcel, which we knew there was some regulated activities building that parcel out. And then typically the applicant would then come back and make application for the build out of the individual parcel. If you guys like that procedure, we can keep it. I'm not, my suggestion is to change it because now I'm going to the commission twice, basically to ask for the same ask. Can I build a house? So
I think,
So why not just let the agent issue it? It's certainly going to help the taxpayer because they're going to be paying an administrative fee instead of probably a larger one going to the commission.
Gary, just to give an example, Gary Upton, Chairman, we've got Twin Valley Lakes. They asked, let's just use round numbers. They asked to put in 25 houses, right?
Correct.
And they put in the examples of areas where where they wanted to put their septic systems. And we sat and belabored the discussion about where they were and approving them and soil samples and all that stuff, right? You're saying that as each one of those, let's say Mr. Fasari ends up finishing this development, which essentially he was just building development, putting in the road, maybe the services to the sites, but didn't really want to issue permits for building houses. And then Joe Blow comes along and buys a lot. You're saying that you don't want that home buyer to have to now come and do it all over again.
Well, I don't know that it warrants, because sometimes we'll issue that permit and say, yeah, he's got to come back through wetlands. Now, if he can situate his house and all the appurtenances outside of the regulated area, great, right? No permits required anyway, unless there's a likelihood that there'd be an impact. But let's say you can't situate everything outside the upland review area. The commission will typically say, okay, well, that's coming back to us and we'll review the house.
Right.
And if you guys want to review the house itself in detail, you're entitled to. I just think it's overkill. When I, as staff, be it whether I have 10 years of experience, 20 or 50 or 2, I have to be qualified to at least review that plan at some level, I would think. So whoever the agent is should be a qualified individual capable of reviewing those plans.
I would say my opinion, Gary Upton, would be that if it aligns with what was originally applied for, like the sizes of the home, the sizes of the septic, the percentages of the septic. I mean, these are things that we belabor discussion over with applicants that are making subdivisions. If it complies with what was set forth or is less than what was set forth but not moved on the site, I would say that sounds like a reasonable idea. I would say if there's any deviation or increase in size or even relocation, I would think that the person should come back before the commission.
I think that just gives a lot of gray area for things to, I think it makes sense to just look at things on a case-by-case basis. Go ahead, Kirsten.
Rosemary Osfeld, that was Rosemary Osfeld for the record, Sue.
Yeah.
Kristen Chantrell, I would like to say I don't think that us looking at any kind of application is saying that the people in town hall are not capable of making that decision, but I think when it does involve wetlands and it is within that buffer, I think that the commission should be taking a look at it.
I absolutely agree.
I mean, that's not because we don't think that you're capable. I think just if there's a regulated activity happening within the buffer that hasn't necessarily definitively been proposed as part of the application, I think that the commission should take a look at it.
Well, and Gary Upton here, one thing that we've said before as a joke, and this is not me saying anything about Gary taking new work or going somewhere, but if Gary's replaced with a college graduate tomorrow, while we might trust Gary to do that job, it doesn't mean that, the new guy is capable, and we'd like the commission to be able to do its job to review these things.
Absolutely.
Right, Gary? Wouldn't you agree?
I would hope that the town, whomever they hired to replace me, would hire someone who is competent and capable. And I suspect, I'd like to think they hired me and I'm competent and capable. So.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, that's all. I think there's a lot of pieces of this upland review thing, these regulations, and there's a lot of discussion that we could sit here and have about these regulations. And as Mr. Gaishel said, we can continue to have conversation, if I'm correct, without quorum, and just have conversation amongst ourselves about our regulations and discuss things that we want to revise and respell and, clarify. The thing, it seems, from day one, again, myself coming onto the committee over 2 years ago, it seems from day one, and I think Ms. Berger can comment on this, the this upland review area. And I would like to urge the committee to essentially, I'd like to discuss changing solely the upland review number in our regulations, so that we'd merely be changing the measurement of the upland review area. And I'd like to recommend that be what we do, because I myself have sat and listened to major, minors, and all these confusing elements. Not to say that I don't understand them, but I'd like for us to, that seems to be the big piece. And I don't know if anyone else agrees with me, but I'd like to knock that piece off, and then we can perhaps take another whack or take our time. I don't want to rush all of these important policies and updates. I mean, it's been a while since these regulations have been updated. There's a lot of little bits and bobs, but I'd like to specifically just change the number of the upland review area. Mr. Koch.
Yes, so there is a lot of common sense to that. No, I have three things to say. That's number one. Number two, the draft we got still looks very raw to me. There's a lot of comments on the side. And number
That's
three,
also not the most recent draft either, the one that we were sent.
and number three is we would need to have a public hearing on it anyway. So I think we could talk this to death tonight, but what we should really do is hear from the public next.
Could I get a copy of the final draft, if you have one, Rosemary? Because I searched my records and that was what I had. I went through it. I went through the copy I had. I had to retype sections almost 12 through the end completely. So I don't know what happened to the iteration I had, but you have the copy that we posted online.
Yeah.
But certainly if we follow Mr. Upton's suggestion of just changing the number, that definitely would clarify things in the sense that we could throw this whole document to the side, make one change, and that be clear. And then if we want to discuss those other elements down the road, we certainly can.
That does seem to make sense because it can keep the conversation on track, and it can, make one meeting, one new provision type of thing. And also, I mean, I think the public should maybe be heard as to whether they do want to have a sweeping change of the regulations, or whether the general idea is, yeah, we just want to increase the upland review area and there's no need to make all kinds of other changes too. Or they might come in and say, we do want sweeping changes and you guys should do it. I think we should hear from them.
I do agree. I think you're saying it allows focus, right? I mean, if we, at any of these pieces, we don't want to, pack in a bunch of change, where we're distracting with the change of the upland review area. That's exactly why I suggested we just change the area.
So go ahead.
Oh no, I'm good. I'm go ahead, Rosemary. I'm done.
So we looked, I uploaded a whole bunch of different wetlands regulations from nearby towns like Stonington, Sherman, and also farther away towns, but Stonington, Sherman, Rocky Hill, Old Lyme, New Milford, Killingworth, Glastonbury, and Burlington. And I believe that based on looking at a variety of different regulations, I would like to make a motion that we extend the regulated area to 500 feet.
So we have a motion to extend the regulated area to 500 feet from Miss Rosemary Ostfeld.
Can I ask, Ms. Ostfeld, those towns you mentioned, do they all have 500 feet?
Some of them have more than that around vernal pools, which is an area that's like of hot debate, obviously. So one of the towns had, I believe, 800 feet around the vernal pools. Another town had 600 feet around different water bodies, so like ponds and lakes. 200 feet was also common, and sometimes you have a larger area based on the slope of the land. So if you have like a really steep slope, then you would have a larger regulated area. Gary, yes.
And that's where I get, I mean, I appreciate needing for us to hire mathematicians, but that's where I think increasing what might be like a, whoa, that's a lot more than I was thinking. I don't like the concept of getting into the slope and the calculation. And then to me, there seems, Ted, you had said a long time ago, like, the further we move that boundary, it seems that people just kind of try to thread the needle. I'm not paraphrasing you exactly, but it was, to moving that line. I don't like the slope thing because, I feel like I'm going to have someone say, oh, the average slope of that hill down to that shoreline, which is also another significant piece here in our town, as opposed to some of these inland towns that are further away from the shore. The slope piece, I feel like that's dangerous. It just seems complicated and dangerous.
Well, I think that,
Ted Koch.
yes, the fewer areas of factual dispute that are possible, the more expeditious our hearings can be, and the more predictability there can be on the part of the public to know what they're getting in for. So to that extent, I agree with you, Gary, Mr. Upton. I think that Burlington is more mountainous than we are, and so the slopes are more relevant to their landscape than ours. But once again, I think what we can do is propose to the public, I think that we've already been talking about just this one little thing for a few minutes. I think that we should take the measurement of the upland review area as a separate proposal.
Yes.
And do that first.
Yep.
And we could inform the public, we're considering 200, we're considering 250, and we're considering 500. And we're also considering making it dependent on the slope. And then we just see what the public says. And then we take that into consideration and make our vote.
Excuse me.
I agree.
Rosemary made a motion
Yep.
to change that to 500 feet. There was no second, but you jumped into discussion. Can we just have some clarification for Sue?
I second
All right.
the motion.
Yeah.
Who seconded?
Gary Upton, Chairman. I second the motion to change the upland review area of our town to 500 feet.
And so my discussion is what I said
Yep.
before. We should let the public hear about that.
Yes.
I agree that we should have a public hearing before we make a major change.
Right. Well, we have to by
We have
statute.
to.
Yeah, we have to. By section, just for everyone's edification, section 22A-42A is essentially the law on how we change anything within our regulations. In doing this a simple way, I hope to simplify how we go through this process. It's my interest, again, the intent of the prior commission, the work they've done. Keep in mind, guys, these regulations are from 2004. Right, the last update, Gary, please correct me if I'm wrong, revised 2011? Revised, yes. But the upland review area, when's the last time that was revised?
Probably in the 90s.
Right. So
it started after 1972, after the Clean Water Act. We had, I think the state model regs came out with 25 feet. Historically, over time, communities have adopted larger and larger areas.
Yeah.
And we're currently at 100.
Mr. Cox.
Yeah, just generally speaking, I don't know. I wasn't on the commission that apparently seemed to sweat bullets over revising these regulations. And I don't know if anybody on this board was. Therefore, I don't think any of us are. What was anybody?
Phyllis.
Yes,
Phyllis.
I was.
So Phyllis, how invested are you in all the other things that we're sort of trying not to go forward on?
I think if we're going to do a public hearing, we should make it as simple as possible for the public to understand.
All right.
I would like to see two things, okay? I agree with the chair as far as the 200 feet. And I also feel that we really need to have the public know as far as notification and the posting of signs
Yes.
I think that should go along with the simple meeting of the 200 feet.
Can I ask you, Phyllis, what was the genesis behind the more thorough overhaul of the regulations?
Well, that was a lot of Cheryl's idea. I mean, I think I pushed for the 200. It's just, I think in all honesty, I think the town is getting overcrowded, and I think a lot of times the wetlands aren't being valued enough. And I think that was probably one of the things that pushed this. It was very, and it still is, very frustrating to see sometimes, how we're just not handling the wetlands well.
Ms. Berger, Gary Upton, I believe the motion was to modify the review area to 500 feet from Rosemary Osfeld.
Well, I think that's a little extreme. We want to get something.
That motion stands as it currently. That was the motion that I seconded. And the motion only stands to currently change the upland review area all by itself. And I do agree that there are a lot of these sign postings, and we're not saying we want to work around not working on that stuff. But we're saying that this upland review area seems to be the hot button, and we just like to get that thing up before the public. Mr. Koch, oh, sorry, Ms. Berger, go ahead.
Oh, no, I think that was Rosemary. She was going to say something.
Oh, was it?
What if we make a decision based on the upland, the regulated area, and then we can make a second motion to do the signage. And I think that would be talking to the public about notification and the regulated area. I don't think that that's too much to do in one meeting, because I think that those are both very reasonable things to discuss.
Procedurally, you could just let the motion fail and someone can make a new motion.
I'd like to let the motion stand.
Yeah, sure.
And I'd like to take a vote on the motion beginning.
Wait, no, but
No,
I just, is it me talking?
Go ahead, Ted.
I think what Mr. Gaishel said is right. We're talking about kind of expanding the motion to include the things that we've just discussed.
I'd recommend the understanding of the Connecticut general statutes further to do that. When we update the regulated, the boundary only, we send a notice to the commissioner. The commissioner has, essentially, we can have our public hearing in 10 days from today. If we stay specific, we can start public hearings, right, on 10 days from today. If we begin packing in these other items, we are posting the meeting. I feel like that's my opinion when we start. There's a lot of items there.
Just to clarify, Gary, procedurally, it can be 10 days, but it has to be 10 days from when the meeting is noticed. Just to clarify. So it wouldn't be today. It would be either tomorrow when we post an agenda, or whatever day we decide to take.
I'd just like to clarify, in addition to that, as a result of COVID-19, the Zoning Commission, Planning Commission have also, we basically agreed, because of the ability to hold public hearings, I mean, I don't want to push a public hearing in 10 days because we can.
Yeah, no, that would just be as soon as.
Right. So I would still, so planning and zoning have agreed to maintain the legal notice requirements that we typically follow, which are posting in the paper, and we're going to continue to do that because that's what people are comfortable with and used to. Obviously, maybe down the road, several years, we can transition just to a digital format, but until then, we're going to still continue to hold those. So that's, the notice gets posted no more than 15 days prior to the hearing and no less than 2 before. So that does expand that 10 days out 15 at a minimum.
Mr. Koch.
Procedurally, if we move forward on a motion to increase the upland review area to 500 feet, and then we hear from the public, and then after discussion, we decide it should be something other than 500 feet, do we have to start over? or can we amend that motion after hearing public comment?
We can amend it.
Okay.
Yeah. It
And I
just
only
sets
say
like
that-
a benchmark.
Yeah, I only say that with such surety because I've poured over these. I figured you guys were working on what the regulations would be in many cases. I wanted to know how the procedure of bringing them forth, because it seems that's where the past regulation modifications have gotten caught up. It just kind of meanders on. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah, I hear you.
It's been 2 years, and I think they worked. Ms. Berger, how many years did they work on changing the regulations in the last commission?
Oh, I don't know, probably 5 or 6. Gary Gaishel would know better than I.
I know I worked directly on it for roughly a year and a half. I could have started possibly 2 years ago. I think the commission may have started talking about it 5 years ago, and it was just more just general discussion. And then Cheryl went ahead and formed a subcommittee to tackle that.
Phyllis, is the issue of signage something that you can distill into one sentence for us?
You know, I kind of rethought it, and listening to our chair, I'm thinking that, you know what, maybe you can wait and just do the measurement for the upland review area.
All right. Fair enough. Thank you.
So we have a motion that stands. Let's
The
take.
motion stands, yeah.
Yep. Motion that stands has been seconded. Was made by Rosemary Osfeld, seconded by myself, if I recall. Don't make fun of me. And I'm going to go down the roll call for votes, starting with myself. I seconded the motion. I am in favor of the motion to increase the upland review area in the town of East Lyme by.
Sorry. Before we do the vote, I have one more question for Mr. Gaishel. Can you give us a draft of the regulations as they were, with that as the only thing as the proposed change?
Yes.
Okay.
That's
Thank you.
That's literally one.
Yeah.
One number, actually. It's just one number.
Yeah.
We change a little bit of text, you know, the 100 to 200, and put the number in there. And I think it only comes up in 2 spots.
I think that I orally proposed that as the thing that we would be voting on like 3 meetings ago. So yes, I'm done. Thank you. You may continue, Mr. Upton. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Koch. So to clarify, we are voting on changing the upland review area to 500 feet. It's a 400-foot increase to a total of 500 feet in the town of East Lyme. The motion was brought by Rosemary Osfeld. It's been seconded by myself. I am in favor of this. Going down, so there's an aye from myself. The next person I will ask is Ms. Chantrell. Are you, sorry, go ahead and with your vote.
Kristen Chantrell, aye.
Okay, moving down, I'm going to go to our secretary, Mrs. Phyllis Berger.
Phyllis Berger, aye.
We have 3, and then the next person running down the line, number 4, Mr. Phi, Don Fiminster. Oh, hold on, you're muted. Go ahead, Don.
Don Fiminster, I vote aye.
That's another aye. Sandy, you're seated. You're not seated technically, right, Sue? Sandy is just hanging out for goodwill. Thank you for doing that, Sandy. I think that's awesome, by the way.
Oh, sure.
Mr. Schmidt, I'm unmuting you so I can get your votes. You're in the grass still. Unmute. Jen, can you help? Thanks, Jen.
Aye.
We have an aye from Mr. Schmidt. And then we'll move down to Mr. Koch. Your vote, sir.
Aye.
And Miss Doreen Ryan, your vote for this motion.
Oh, she's not seated right now.
Oh, she's not. Well, then we have unanimous ayes.
Oh, and then me, aye.
Rosemary.
Oh, sorry,
Rosemary,
Rosemary.
aye.
Sorry, she made the motion. I apologize for not being redundant. So all seated commission members have voted in favor of changing our regulations in one element from 100 feet to 500 feet. Thanks, guys. I think it's the beginning of a good change. Congratulations to everybody. There it is.
When would you like to hold that public hearing?
What do we think?
ASAP.
Let's give it, I mean, I think we should give it good posting.
Well, I mean, I would,
I would say as soon as possible.
Yep.
when was our next regularly scheduled meeting in June? I think it was set for, was it the 8th or the 15th? I don't.
The
8th. Would you want to
On the
plan
8th.
for a meeting on the 8th? Does that give us enough time to notice and paper? It does.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
8th sounds good.
It's not as soon as it could be, but it's soon enough, I think, without, we don't want anyone to feel rushed.
I mean, again, because it's going to be a commission-initiated application, we can leave the public hearing open indefinitely, type of a thing. Kind of, it can stay open. We don't have to follow the typical 35-day timeline there.
Right.
So we can certainly make sure we gather plenty of public comment.
So one of the concerns I'd like to bring forth is, so we agree on June 8th? Sorry, just to clarify, June
Yes,
8th,
thank
everybody?
you.
Correct.
One of the things I'd like to bring forth with the new business, and I appreciate, again, the patience of the applicants that sit while we go through this measly stuff. If you bring yourself to section 15.2 of our regulations, 15.2 is about as fun as all of it, but I'm going to read it into the record for everyone, just in the conclusion of this regulation discussion. An application filed with the agency which is in conformance with the applicable inland wetland regulations as of the date of receipt of such application shall not be required thereafter to comply with any change in inland wetland regulations, including changes to setbacks and buffers, pardon me, taking effect on or after the date of such receipt, and any appeal from the decisions of such agency with respect to such application shall not be dismissed by the Superior Court on the grounds that such change has taken effect on or after the date of such receipt. The provisions of this section shall not be construed to apply. And that's the important part. I'll read that again. The provisions of this section shall not be construed to apply. Item 1. To the establishment, amendment, or change of boundaries of inland wetlands or watercourses. Importantly, item number 2, to any change in regulations necessary to make such regulations consistent with the provisions of the Act as of the date of such receipt. Now, we can read it all over again, but I've kind of myself poured on it and we can tease this out. The way I understand this, for what I understand this to say, and I'll kind of get to my cause and effect here. These regulations have been sitting, waiting to be changed, as we now know on the record for Ms. Berger, 6 years, 4 years, 8 years, 2 years while I've been around. Clearly, there has been an intent to change the upland review area. As such, I would like to motion that there be a moratorium on any of the applications, including the current standing new business, that it be, and that those applications have to be applied to our new changed regulation of 500 feet if we make that change. That is the motion that I am making.
Oh, could you restate that?
Yeah, it's complicated, right? I would like to put a moratorium in place on any new business applications.
Just business?
Any new application.
Okay.
So whatever we would usually see under new business, item number 7 on this particular agenda,
Okay.
this would suspend the application of B, C, and D.
Is that part of your motion?
I mean, this is explanation, I apologize. Just to make a moratorium for these, any new and forthcoming applications until this piece of our regulations have been updated. Because of the timeliness that I've seen as myself, the chairman, the prior chair, the things that we know, going again back to item 1.1 of the Act, our job is to protect the environment. Going to section 17, if there's a conflict in the provisions, the provision which imposes the most stringent standards, all of these pieces, in my opinion, substantiate that we should do that.
That's not all part of your motion, right?
No, thank God, no.
Okay, so what I'm putting down is that there's a moratorium on any new applications until you said this piece of these regulations are adopted.
All right, well, let's not presuppose them to be adopted because we are going to go, before they're decided upon, we're going to go to public hearing. We might have public hearing. We got to listen to the public. I'm sure that there's going to be a few people there. We do want to hear what their opinion is prior to them. So I just don't want to presuppose any pre-approvals or denials in any state whatsoever.
Okay, so I have new new application, moratorium on new applications until this piece of these regulations, and then.
Has been decided upon. Does that make sense, guys? Does everyone understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying.
I understand what you're saying. I'm not sure we can do it, but if you want to go ahead, take a vote, and then we can follow up with legal counsel and see if that's doable.
Yeah, I have something to say about that, but I'll wait for the discussion part.
Okay. So a motion stands from myself. Are we clear on the motion, Sue?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do we read it one more time into the record?
Sure. I have a moratorium on any new applications. I think you might want to clarify this language, but this is what you said, until this piece of these regulations has been decided on.
Yeah, the current, this piece, so the piece being the modification of the upland review area.
Regulated area distance is decided upon.
So,
which one?
Gary, could you help distill that, please?
So what I have here is a motion to hold a moratorium on new applications until the proposed regulations are enacted.
Yes, essentially, this particular upland review piece are enacted, yes.
So I just use the word proposed. You want to be more specific and say the proposed 500-foot increase?
Yeah, or 400-foot increase to 500 feet, yes. Does that make sense?
So I would maybe, Sue, that moratorium on new applications until the proposed 400-foot increase in the regulations is enacted. Would you agree with that language?
Or until the 500-foot regulated area is enacted. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, because we could have public hearing on that for one time, two times. Who knows what happens with COVID? If we get the promise of opening back up in July, why not do this two times? We could do it digitally here. Then we could also perhaps do it in town hall. I know with 7B, we have the current applicants that have been, again, very patient here tonight. We do have the time with 7B from our governor anyway, we have the time for them to wait on decisions for anything that's going on there, right, Mr. Gaishel?
We have 90 days on any pending or new applications that are submitted anyway for scheduling. I would think, though, with the advent of virtual meetings, and now that we have the capability and the ability, there's really no reason why we can drag feet on any of this stuff, for lack of a better term. So with that said, I mean, we can probably get back to a regular meeting schedule. And if we need the 90 days, we have it.
Yep. But point being, we're not, essentially, with what the governor's afforded us, this motion still essentially gives them hopefully the same timeline.
Correct. And now and then as that relates to the new business that's on this, on the current agenda, you've got an application here for a determination. And if it's determined that it needs a wetland permit, right, they'll have to apply. Question is, will they now have to sit and wait days or longer if it takes that long to adopt regulations? Either way, right, they know, hey, I've got a potential, maybe just talking in general, whatever applicant it is, maybe they know they have regulated activities, but we got to wait because the regs aren't updated. But yet I know I have regulated activities. Why can't I just go before the commission and have them render a decision?
I think they're just going to have to wait. And again, I think that we'll be fairly expedient because we have, we're taking one item at a time. We have Mr. Koch waving at us. Yes, sir.
Yes, I think there's two problems with that. I think it's an ex post facto law, which is unconstitutional because it has retroactive effect. And I think it could be a problem with due process if you make people wait until we come to a decision. The people are entitled to notice of what the law is. And I know we want to move fast on this, and we don't want somebody to just file a permit right before we pass a law, but I just don't think it's constitutional to do it that way, honestly.
Mr. Koch, my concern, and I understand the concept, is directly from our regulations, section 15.2. I don't know if you've read that, but if you read that, to any change in regulations necessary to make such regulations consistent with the provisions of the act as of the date of such receipt. The way that section is written affords us that ability, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but the Constitution says no state shall pass any ex post facto law. And an ex post facto law has been defined as one that has retroactive effect. In other words, if the state of Connecticut says, you know, we're thinking of passing a law that gives you the death penalty for speeding, and by the way, before we pass it, if we catch you speeding, you're going to be subject to the death penalty once we pass it. That's kind of what you're saying.
And I do understand your very vivid explanation. I think my opinion, again, is item 1.1 says protect the environment, and section 17 says if there's a conflict, go with a higher rate.
Yeah, but there's also, in Marbury versus Madison, the Supreme Court said when any legislation conflicts with the Constitution wins.
I have something to say.
Mr. One question, 1 second, Phyllis. Mr. Gaishel, hasn't planning and zoning done this when they've been updating regulations?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Hasn't planning and zoning done the moratorium when they've been updating regulations?
The Planning Commission had in the past. I'm not, you know.
Neither of them have done that in the entire time I've worked in the zoning office. The last time there was a moratorium on subdivisions was, I believe, in 2003. It has not, but zoning has never done a moratorium to update their regs.
So what was the answer, Gary?
So the Planning Commission has. Short answer is yes. It sounds like it was 2003.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Sue has a question.
Mr. Koch, hold on.
Sue Spang has.
I'll get to Sue one thing.
Do you want to get a second?
What about Phyllis?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Phyllis.
Sorry, Phyllis. I was just calling out there.
You know what? I'm trying to look at both sides, and I don't think you're being fair to the new businesses here. They've, they've already submitted their application, and I think you should, we should consider them. If you want to make the date of the moratorium like tomorrow, anything after tomorrow, which would be what, 5/19, then I would probably maybe go along with that. But it's not fair to these other people that we already have on the agenda.
I think you're right. I agree, actually.
Okay.
I don't disagree.
Schmidt.
Mr. Schmidt?
I would just like to say, given what we just discussed here, these applications or these revisions have been considered for 2 years or 4 years or 6 years or 8 years. I don't know what the accurate answer is. I think it places an undue burden on any applicant to say, you have to wait until we decide if and when we're going to change our regulations. I just think I agree with Ted. I agree with Ted. I think it's a dangerous place to go.
Okay, so we would agree that the new business, am I formulating this correctly to understand Mr. Schmidt, Ted Koch, and Ms. Berger, and what it seems like is Sue and even Jen's opinion, is that the new business that is currently on the agenda should not be upheld to this?
I agree with that as well.
I'm going beyond that. I think if an applicant comes in tomorrow or the next day or next week, we can't say, no, you can't apply because we're thinking of changing our regulations, and you might have to wait 5 years for us to do so.
Yeah, that's the due process problem.
Yeah, I have a problem with that. I think we need to amend our regulations, and until they're amended,
they're subject to
anybody can apply according to the regulations in place today until we amend them.
look, if we're functional, we can get this done soon.
Agreed.
We can, and I have no doubt that we intend to. That isn't the issue. But, you know, if I were going to apply for something and you told me I had to wait, and then the history of this board is that it takes many years to change your regulations. We here in this room today may firmly agree that we're going to do this within the next month or two. That's a different issue. But if we don't get it done, or if we can't concur, or we don't agree, and it drags on for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, I think that's an unfair burden to put on anybody. We're basically denying people the use or any permitted use on their property until we decide to change our regulations, which might be next month, next week, or 5 years from now.
How would you feel if we put a timeline on it?
I'm still nervous about doing it.
Okay.
I think up until we update the regulations, we need to stick with the regulations in force the day the application is received. That's my opinion.
Okay.
I think Kristen Chantrell had a comment.
Oh, not anymore.
So our motion that was standing was to make a moratorium, including new business on the agenda.
Nobody seconded that, by the way.
Right. I don't think that you should second, or I don't think that my motion that I made should include new business on the agenda. I believe if our planning departments made a moratorium before, that we could do so for a limited period of time.
Well, I mean, my opinion, you can, you can't. From what I heard, listening to Ted, the issue of due process, I prefer to proceed cautiously and conservatively in that regard. That said, my suggestion is stick with your 500 feet, set your public hearing, and we can look into the moratorium aspects, and if we can get around that. In the interim, as Mr. Schmidt said, they'll still be subject to the 100-foot upland review and the commission's, decision. So that, at least activities within 100 feet will continue to come to you. Between 101 and 500, we'll have to wait. But again, unless we can get around the due process issue, I'd rather pursue it conservatively and go in that direction. Just my opinion.
I mean, in theory, if we had the public hearing on the 8th of June and people show up on Zoom and there is agreement for the 500 feet, we could, what would be the next phase after that?
You're going to probably continue to leave the public hearing open. We got to send referrals out to the Council of Governments because it's going to affect lands within 500 feet of the town boundary. We send referrals to Salem, Montville, Old Lyme, Lyme. They all get to take a crack at it. So Board of Selectmen are going to want to review and comment on it. I would probably think they have something to
That's
say.
not what the CGS says.
Yeah, BOS does not.
No, we don't have to send it to them, but I think you may want to.
The CGS says that we only send it to the commissioner.
Fair enough.
It's exactly what it says.
I understand. I'm not debating what it says. Why wouldn't you send it to your Board of Selectmen, though? I would. I'd send it to the Zoning Commission and get their input. The 500 feet as a whole, you know where I stand on that. I've been quoted, or I can be quoted from previous meetings. I think the additional increase is definitely burdensome, but we'll have to wait to hear from the public if that is the case.
Yeah, and about that, just because we notify other authorities doesn't mean we have to let them usurp our role. We can make our own decision.
Right.
I think it's a nice thing to do, and it's nice to be nice. So we send out the referrals, and again, the Council of Government, they're a body of planners who have a lot of experience in this. We can send it to Eastern Connecticut Conservation District, Judy Rondo. Lots of expertise in this. So there's lots of experts we can have look at this and say if it's a good idea or not. I'm sure nobody's going to argue with it because you're just increasing a regulated area. The people who are going to argue will be the builders, the homeowners, and those folks. So
yeah, and then we'll add due weight to their various perspectives.
Exactly.
All right.
and then process will have been due.
Very good. So are we comfortable moving on with just that, or there's a motion? I didn't hear a second. I don't think you heard one, Sue.
No second.
There no second for the motion? All right, there's no second for the motion. The motion fails. To clarify, my motion would not have been currently active on our other applicants on our agenda, but maybe that wasn't clear.
All right, do we want to move on the agenda, or?
Sure. Or what's the other option? Go home?
We are home.
We are home. Thank you, Mr. Smith. We have Nottingham Hills re-subdivision, a request of Kristen T. Clark, and we also have the 21 Marshfield.
So item B, Nottingham Hills re-subdivision request of Kristen T. Clark, PE, owner for owner English Harbor Asset Management LLC for the determination of permitted / non-regulated activity at Upper Kensington Drive as part of a 4-lot re-subdivision, East Lyme Assessors Map 40.0, lot 2-3 and 2-2. We have the applicant here.
You do. Paul Garrity for English Harbor Asset Management. So let me start this by saying that this obviously is an application for determination by this commission that there's no activity within the inland wetlands itself or within the upland review area. And if you look at the plans that we submitted on this, you'll see, thank you, Jen, for putting that up. There's currently a 2-lot subdivision approved. We have submitted a plan for a 4-lot re-subdivision. If I can start in the lower left-hand corner, you'll see a lot that's outlined in yellow. And then above that, which is the proposed lot 2, the one above, a lot outlined in orange. Those are the only 2 lots that have any wetlands on them, and they're fairly small areas. The lighter blue line is the 100-foot review line or buffer. Proposed lots 3 and 4 do not have any wetlands on them. In proposed lot 4, the plan is if the Planning Commission approves the re-subdivision, proposed lot 4 will be transferred to the East Lyme Land Trust as part of a larger donation by my client or transfer of the land behind it. The current existence of the lots, the wetland area and the review area will not be disturbed because the area where the proposed houses are has already been cleared for that. So we think this is a fairly straightforward, just a request for a referral from you that there is no activity in it and then therefore no jurisdiction over it. If we look at the you'll see in this application, if you go to, in this exhibit, if you go to Exhibit BB, which is the original existing subdivision, the proposal here had 2 separate driveways. In the re-subdivision proposal, we are merging them into 1 driveway, and as a result of that, we decrease the impervious surface on the properties, thereby reducing the addition or creating additional area for infiltration of the water on the developed site itself. In addition, the house that is on the proposed lot 2 on Exhibit AA, Jen, if you could flip back to that. Is below the gradient of the wetlands, so that the waters for those 2 parcels are going to drain away from the wetland areas as opposed to toward them. If you look right about the buffer line is the divide between the watershed where the water runs to the wetlands naturally. And again, that area is presently undisturbed, will remain undisturbed. It's forested. The area where the house is proposed has already been cleared. And same with the area on proposed lot 1. So there isn't any particular activity proposed in there, and we're asking for a referral from you indicating that there's no regulated activity taking place, and therefore no jurisdiction from the Inland Wetlands Commission.
Mr. Chair, I had a question for the applicant. And maybe Ms. Lindo could scroll over to the far right corner of the sheet just to confirm the date of your map versus what I had in my file.
These are the new exhibits, Gary, that were submitted on Friday.
Okay, because that differs than the plan that we sent and referred to the town engineer, which our date, can you tell me what the date of that plan is?
I can't see it because of the fact that I'm screen sharing.
Okay, I didn't know if you could zoom in on your screen or.
Gary, which exhibit are you looking for?
The one that's up on the screen now, I believe that's A.
Okay.
A, yes.
April 23rd, 2020.
Okay, so that's a different plan than what I had in my file here. So I believe the town engineer did comment, and I too was going to make the comment. He just said that it looked like there was some activity in the upland review area, and the date I have on the plan I have is January 29th, 2020, and it wasn't revised, and it shows the primary and reserve system within the upland, but your plan clearly shows it moved. So we just for the record, this is the plan we'll go forward with, and based on that, I would change my comments to say that the proposed subdivision doesn't show any regulated activities.
Question.
I was gonna say Rosemary has a question.
Hi. Yes, please. Thank you. I'm just looking at, okay, so I just want to make sure I'm understanding this properly. I'm looking at this lot, which is highlighted in yellow, and the dark blue highlighter is showing the wetland. Is that correct? Can someone?
That's correct.
Okay. And now I'm looking at the light blue line of the highlighter, and that is the upland review area, and it says here primary septic system. So there's a septic system going through the upland review area?
No, that's incorrect. If you look at that, the primary septic system has an arrow pointing to the right of that, which shows the septic system outside. That's just the notation directing you to the location of it, but it's outside the upland review area.
All right, that's slightly misleading.
Yeah, but you can see it though. You can see that. I wouldn't have seen that arrow either. Now I see a lot of arrows.
So there's a septic system which is just outside the upland review.
It is approximately 6 feet outside the review area.
So yeah, this is very similar to a lot of the other things that we do see and that we talk about as a committee, is when things just go right outside the review area.
And I have a question. If this is a conservation development, so are there rain gardens that are going to be put in?
Well, I don't believe this has been previously approved for that, but as part of that, there aren't any proposed at this point in time. If I could address Commissioner Osveld's question, when I looked at you and I told it was 6 feet out, I was actually reading the topo difference on that. The system itself is closer to 30 feet away from the, because I was looking at the topo lines. I didn't scale it out, and I just did. It's more like 30 feet away from the buffer boundary.
Paul, was the original subdivision brought before inland wetlands?
Yes.
Yes.
So the first decision to make it 2 parcels was brought here?
Correct, because we had wetlands on the property at that. I mean, the wetlands are still there, so it had to go for a review at that point in time.
And now we've got 2, and we're multiplying that by a factor of 2 to get 4.
There will be 3. The Planning Commission has been asked to approve 4 lots, but only 3 are for purposes of development. The 3rd lot is going to be conveyed to the land trust to add to the parcel that's going to them from the balance of the parcel that's going to them from my client.
Did you say that you was being donated on behalf of your client, or?
my client is English Harbor Management. My understanding is that Mr. Pizzalia, when he's under contract to buy these, he's going to donate it to them at that point in time.
And
So wait,
when-
Pizzaglia is involved with this application as well? It's kind of confusing.
No, he's not. It's English Harbor is the applicant.
Where is the?
But I don't know that any of that matters, frankly, because we're simply asking for a determination that there's no activity within the wetlands, so we can go to the Planning and Zoning Commission for them to make a determination as to whether or not re-subdividing this into 4 lots is appropriate.
Where's the delineation of this proposed donated land?
There isn't any, but it's not a matter for the jurisdiction. But if you look over here in 4, that green parcel, that area over there, is to be donated to the land trust.
Why does it have a proposed house then?
Because they have to show it in order to be able to subdivide it. In other words, if we want to say we want to get 4 building lots out of this, but we're going to donate that one, we want to be able to show that it's a buildable lot.
It seems to me that if the prior concept of 2 came before the commission, that to now further divide the land and put more of a burden on the land is now, even though it's 3 as opposed to 4, I believe that it's my opinion that this would come, especially with, again, this threading of the needle that Rosemary's talking about. I think this should come before the commission. That's my opinion, you guys. Go ahead and talk about it, please.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the proposed house is what, 10, 20 feet off the upland review area. And I mean, if this doesn't come before us, we don't get to walk the site or see it. I mean, there's a lot of topography here. I'd be curious to see what this looks like.
Well, but the issue here is your regulations provide for a review of a regulated activity when it's within the buffer or when it's within the wetlands. And what we're submitting to you as part of this application, there isn't going to be any activity either in the wetlands or within the buffer area. And therefore, there's no jurisdiction for the commission to take any other action on this at this point in time.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, the proposed house and with the pitch of the land there has the potential significant impact or the potential to cause pollution of a wetland or water course. If you had a failed septic system, I mean, we're in a preliminary discussion here, but in my opinion, there's no question that that is a potential to cause pollution or wetland or water course, and thus, technically, this would be subject to a public hearing.
Well, again, I would disagree. And again, I'm going back to your regulations that talk about what regulated activities are. I think we're getting out into some theories that the potential, I mean, if the house burned to the ground and the fire department came out and put the fire out and PFS got sprayed all over the house, yes, you have the potential for it, but you have to deal with what we're proposing, and what we're proposing doesn't involve any activity either in the wetlands or in the buffer.
But it may impact those wetlands or the buffer, and that is our jurisdiction.
But you have to prove that there's a likelihood.
Right.
And are we able to prove that there's a likelihood based on the proposed activities going to have an adverse impact to the inland wetlands or water courses? That was the burden of the commission. If it is going to extend that regulated area, I would point you to your definitions of regulated area or regulated activity. And it means any operation within or use of a wetland or water course involving removal or deposition of material or any obstruction, reconstruction, alteration, or pollution of such wetlands and water course, but shall not include the specified activities in section 4 of the regulations. And then looking at regulated area, which
I think Ms. Chantrell had something to say.
Yeah, so are you saying that for lot 1, that yellow lot where that proposed house is, there's no clearing that needs to be done to construct that house?
Correct. That's all been cleared, that area.
So there's no trees on it currently?
Correct.
And so I would, if I can I want to continue on that definition of regulated activity. It says, furthermore, any clearing, grubbing, filling, grading, paving, excavating, construction, depositing or removing of material, and discharging of stormwater on the land within 100 feet measured horizontally from the boundary of any wetland or watercourse is a regulated activity. Now, this is where it gets interesting. The agency may rule that any other activity located within such upland review area or in any other non-wetland or non-watercourse area is likely to impact or affect wetlands or watercourses and is a regulated activity. So you can rule that way, but I would say if you do, you need to demonstrate why there's a likely impact to those watercourses.
Can I ask how would that be demonstrated? Would it just be based on the four corners of this exhibit, or do we have would we?
I would say, well, you would be looking at this exhibit and all the ones that were submitted and say, okay, does he provide for erosion sedimentation control? All the activities outside the 100-foot upland review area. Okay, so is there something else going on that we're not seeing here? There's no proposed grading. On the plans that I have proposed grading, or some. No, actually, I have some proposed grading, looks like with the driveways, but even then it's not. So some of that's missing. But, so those are things that you can consider. Again, he's going to install a silt fence right at, 101 feet. So I think it's a difficult task to demonstrate that the proposal would have a likelihood of an impact.
Well, Gary, this is a provisional overview. We really don't have much information. It's the point of a public hearing and expert testimony and the public and a variety of things to show us information that we can decide upon. So to say that we need to sit here and stitch together the most perfect defense, we're just looking to do what is best to protect the water.
Correct. I understand. So, you can make the ruling and find that if you believe that those activities would likely impact the wetland, you can require them to get a permit.
Other than size and scope, it's no different than 25 houses threading the needle of wetlands in the exact same manner at a variety of applications that I could rattle off the names of.
Mr. Chairman, may I just, the septic locations are generally in the very same area that they were approved of the first time. So we're talking about two septic systems. Excuse me, let me orient it. The septic system for lot 1A. My maps are, the orientation of the maps changes depending on which one.
Go on color, so the septic system for the yellow lot?
Correct. On the yellow lot is generally in the same location as that which was approved originally. Obviously, the second lot is not, because the second lot didn't exist. Lot 2A, the orange lot.
Yep.
And that's the one that's the closest to the wetland buffer.
How about the pink? How about the pink one back there?
Pink one is pretty much in the same location. It's a little bit to the west, but again, that's substantially distant from the wetland boundary.
Yep.
Or the buffer, excuse me.
Yep. So I'm just looking at the grade here as it goes down and runs. Where is the wetland as it runs off the map? It looks like it kicks off to the west.
If you can't see me pointing, but if we look at the map on the orange line, the wetland is in the northwestern corner of the property, and then it goes up to the north and down to the southwest.
Okay. What's the closest wetland off the northern border of the proposed the pink lot?
Let me just see. The one we're looking at, that's the closest, and that everything behind that is going to be open space. That's the land that my client is donating to the land trust, or transferring to the land trust.
There's a comment. I just want to alert people that there's a comment that has been put into the chat box. So I don't know if Gary, you want to read that or anything. I just wanted to flag that. I saw there's a comment in the chat box.
I can't see the chat box when I'm in screen share, so.
That's fine. I just wanted to let somebody know.
We're not at a point, unfortunately, while it may or may not be evidential, where the public can comment. Mr. Gaishel, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe that should be.
We're not.
brought into the record at this.
Okay, all right, I just wanted to let you know.
And we do thank Kim for her comment. Kim, this is not us trying to silence what you have to say. If we decide that this should have an application and we were to decide that this needs a public hearing, at that time, we would ask that you come and speak to the commission at that time. Mr. Gaishel, is what I'm saying correct?
Gary, you're muted.
Still muted. Go ahead. Now you're not muted.
I thought I unmuted myself. Okay. You're correct. I think the question is for clarification. I know we haven't done a site walk or a visit. What are the current conditions on the site? My understanding from having driven by the site is that it's vegetated. There is some rock ledge outcrops you can see out there as well behind the existing home that you see to the on the north side of the proposal. I don't know if that helps, but I don't know that it's completely, I don't think anything's really been completely cleared out there. There is vegetation growing. It's pretty much kind of in a raw land. There was some fill material brought in along the driveway access. But aside from that, I don't think any other activity has really occurred out there from my observations from the street.
Just to clarify for the record, it was Kim Bucko, if I remember, or is it Ducko? I apologize, Jen.
It was Bucko.
Bucko, 18 Upper Kensington. Kim, again, we by no means would ever want to silence the public. We are learning how this Zoom thing works. We're not allowed to let you speak to us or to the applicant or discussively get into all that. I know it's very frustrating because there's this whole procedure that drives us somewhat crazy. If we find that this should be an application and we find that the application should be for public hearing, that is when you could say something. You may also, as it's public record from the agenda posted, you can send a letter to Gary Gaishel, our town's agent, at the town hall. Mr. Gaishel, please again, tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, you can send correspondence to me, and I can try to convey your concerns to the, through my reviews, if you had any. But we're not even at that point yet. Don't even know if this would need a permit or a public hearing. It's the commission needs to render that determination. So with no further ado, I'll give it back to you, Mr. Chair.
All right, guys. So, Jen, can you give us back? I think we understand the concept of the lot layout. Is there any further? Sorry, I apologize, Paul. Is there any further presentation that you would like to do on behalf of the applicant, Paul?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I didn't mean to cut you off. I
no,
agree.
All right. This is difficult. I know it is. Right. I can't see you either.
It's probably a good thing considering all things. No, that's essentially it at this point.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right, so Jen, if you want to turn that screen off, we'll go to just talking with the commission. Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome.
So commission members, we have, Gary, our decision is basically, does this warrant a application, right?
Correct. You would probably take a look at, what are considered exempt activities under your regs. Does it fall into one of that? Is it a regulated activity? Are you going to make a ruling that even though the activities are outside the 100-foot upland review area, that there's a likelihood of an impact? That is kind of what's before you. Yes.
It's my sentiment that if it was done previously, that we should consider it. I mean, it was previously applied for before the commission. Was there a public hearing last time this was applied for?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, thank you. No, it's all right. So we have, in my opinion, a set of parameters that were brought forth before the public to say, hey, can we do this? The public came out. I don't know. I wasn't there. And a decision was made based upon that. It would seem if I were a member of that group or potential aggrieved person, I certainly would want another whack at this situation. That's my opinion. I'd ask the attorneys and those that are purveyors of the law on the commission to tell me if I'm overstepping Ted Koch and David Schmidt. But what do we think?
Well, a jurisdictional question is whether you even have the right to weigh in on it, right? And so we have to look at this map and decide whether that gives us jurisdiction. And if everything is outside of our upland review area, then we have to think of a reason why we would have jurisdiction based on facts that would lead us to believe that the activity that's outside our scope of review would somehow impact on wetlands or watercourses. And I'm a little bit torn because I don't know how to evaluate that based on a map. I like the idea of site walks, but we only can do a site walk if we decide we have jurisdiction. But it's hard to tell if you have jurisdiction without looking at the land.
Yeah, we're going to go with Ms. Chantrell and then Mr. Schmidt. They both seem to have comments. Go ahead, Ms. Chantrell.
Yes, I agree, Ted, because I think similar to the Roxbury Road application we had, all of their activity was outside the upland review area, but we knew that there was lots of ledges. We knew that there was wetlands on that property. And without seeing this property to see, is it cleared? How steep are the ledges? I mean, we're within 10, 20 feet from the upland review area. I would think that, especially considering that there's septics involved, that this would be something that we should open for public hearing and be able to do a site walk to better gauge the property and if there are potential impacts.
Okay, on that, I would just point back to the application itself that was submitted. And so while we didn't schedule this up for a site walk, basically the undersigned consents to the necessary and proper inspections of the above mentioned property by the commission or agent of the commission at reasonable times, both before and after final decision has been made by the commission. So my thought there is, you don't have to render a decision tonight. You could schedule a site walk.
I like that. I like that.
You could individually go look at the site. Again, if we schedule a site walk during COVID, let's make this as complicated as we can, right? So we're going to have social distancing. I mean, it's a big to-do. Yeah. But that said, it can be done. We have a clock. Know that there's a clock ticking before the Planning Commission, because that application was submitted. Both were submitted simultaneously. And again, failure of this commission to act and furnish a report to the Planning Commission doesn't automatically approve it, but planning is going to be under a little bit of a gun, so to speak. So there's a timeline that we're following. Yes, we have 90 days. I can extend everything per the governor's order. So hopefully that would help us work everything out. So I think if everybody's on board, we could just schedule up a site walk Saturday prior to the 8th.
I have an idea for the site walk. Maybe if we all drove separately and then sat in our cars, walked out one at a time, and then I guess if we have a question for Gary, could we just call and do like a group call and ask a question to Gary so we can all hear that so we don't have to be in the same space physically?
Well, I think we'll be outside. If we have masks on, we could be socially distanced.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Especially if it's
I agree with that.
right? I mean, we can all.
We can
stay
social
away from each
distance and
other.
do a site walk.
Yeah, I think that the science has shown that outdoor transmission of COVID has been very rare.
Well, if we all have masks on too.
With masks and with standing apart and everything. Not that we're going to
Yeah.
all swarm
I'm
together like
comfortable with that.
penguins. Yeah.
So that's something that's doable. And then we can, on the 8th, come back to this discussion and based on your site observations, make that determination.
The 8th isn't far.
Pardon?
The 8th isn't that long from now.
Right, 2 weeks. The other thing is if there's still outstanding questions, we can ask the applicant if he has any other information that might help make this decision easier. Again, but it's not a full-blown application.
Gary, my concern is we're not using a soil scientist or any engineer. We're now solely relying on a site walk by us. And we're not actually using any expert testimony or evidence for this. That's which is usually something we have in support.
Well,
right, but the expert testimony is the plan, which has been stamped and signed by an engineer, and I believe the wetlands were previously delineated by a soil scientist. So I think those reports would stand. Does that make sense?
Plus,
when they were
plus
delineated.
plus we have the expertise of the members of our board.
But the matter at hand, right, is to decide whether or not this person should apply.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty low level considering that previously on this lot, there was a public hearing to do what they've done. So we're sitting here deciding if they should even apply to do something, and they've changed something they did at public. They want to change something that was approved at public hearing. It seems a bit of a double standard to me.
It's a jurisdictional question. It is a low bar, and I don't think we need to bring experts in to start talking about jurisdiction. And maybe if we do the site walk and we think that we can't decide it without bringing some expert, then we can take the next step. But to go with experts right off the bat just to decide if we need jurisdiction, I don't think is necessary.
Mr. Chair, sorry, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman, just I think maybe when I might have been misunderstood when we talked about when I talked about a public hearing, I was talking about for the subdivision. There was not a public hearing for the wetlands review. That was administrative.
Okay, that's important to know. All right, that's a good clarification. So there was, I'm clarifying, Paul, there was no public hearing for inland wetlands for this original subdivision.
Correct.
Okay, that's what so I understood that there was, and I said, heck, how are we doing this?
Right, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, for this came in phases, just so we understand. There's one or two. I haven't been involved in all of them, but this phase for these parcels that we're talking about there was no public hearing conducted for that.
But so then going back to, so it's part of how many other pieces as a phase?
Well, this was phase 3, and it was in a total of 16 lots.
Okay. You guys have an opinion. I have mine. I mean, what do we want to do here? Any other thoughts?
I'm comfortable using the site walk as in like intermediate step that we can take to look at the land, and then we can render a decision. It's only about 2 weeks out. I think that that's, reasonable. I feel comfortable with that. Phyllis, do you have anything?
No, I absolutely agree. I always have problems looking at the maps, and having a site walk is really the best thing to do for all the rest of the stuff too. I mean, there's the Marshfield Road and the Creek Road. I mean, I think we should have site walks for those too.
Not a bad idea, I guess.
I think that also
instead of spending a lot of time here discussing things.
Yeah.
Should we, so before we even would you contest it before we even discuss and go over Marshfield Road and that stuff? We're just saying, hey, to Gary Gaishel, let's do a site walk for both these things.
Yes.
Now you're talking about 3 though, right?
Well, the 21, the Giants Neck Heights Clubhouse, because I've gone and looked, and 21 Marshfield, it's the same lot.
So,
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
On that
So
matter,
it'd be 2 spots.
Because they submitted literally 2 separate documents signed by different people, we have to treat them as 2 separate requests.
But it's the same gig, right? It's the same job.
It's the same project, yeah.
It's to remediate Phragmites, as I understand it.
Right. So I think we can just eliminate one of those when we get to that point with the applicant, but I didn't want to get there until we handled this matter.
Do we have this application, the Nottingham Hills, is going in front of planning?
It is pending. It's pending. It just right now, staff review. We've got 65 days to schedule a public hearing plus 90. So yeah, we just haven't scheduled the public hearing yet. We've got to get the planning commission up and on Zoom. So
okay.
Chances of that happening before our June 8th meeting, slim to none.
But it is an application going forward, subject to the regulations that are in effect at the current time.
And it's a conservation development design? Or no?
All of them are required to be, aren't they?
In a roundabout sort of way, most of them are required to be.
Because it was approved for 2 lots and it's now approved for, it's trying.
it was part of a 16 lot subdivision. The original Nottingham Hills here up at the end of the cul-de-sac was part of, as we heard, was it phase 3 of a 16 lot subdivision. That went in, and now consider this an additional phase if you needed to understand it. But now they're just saying, hey, we got excess acreage on this one lot. We can divide that now into 3 more.
Technically one more in their favor. If I wouldn't like that if that were their attorney. They've got 2, they're adding 1 more, right?
Well, they've got 2, they're actually adding 2 more.
Right. But one of them is going to be given into open space or something.
We don't technically know that, and it's on the plan, but it until it gets conveyed, that's a planning decision whether that will. And as a matter of fact, they're actually proposing the building lot, so it's not even an open space issue. It's just a building lot as far as planning is concerned.
But our approval could stipulate that, right?
Your approval could stipulate what?
If we decided if we decide after a site walk that we do need an application, our approval could stipulate that 4th lot cannot be a buildable lot and that it would be just an open space lot.
I think that would be a stretch because it's so far removed from the wetlands.
Okay, then why did it come up?
Because it was a lot number 4 in the application.
I think he had to verify that he could, in fact, have built it under zoning regulations.
Okay.
But he's taking it away and giving it back as open space.
Right. He could have just labeled it as an open space lot. You can convey open space without subdivision approval. So, but if it, as a conservation subdivision needing open space, we have a 30% requirement to take advantage of the flexible dimensional flexibility offered by those regulations. So my thought would be, I would have used the excess acreage as part of the open space requirement, but I don't know. I've got to review the file. There's a lot involved in there that, again, needs a public hearing. There's a whole process we follow. So I've got a bit of review to do. And
I guess I'm just bringing it up when I say it as a condition because it just adds flavoring, right? It's like, well, we're really only offering 1 lot. And now it's like, well, no, actually, the way it's written, they're saying 4 lots out of 2.
Right, but Wetlands doesn't get to determine how many lots he gets. Wetlands gets to determine what you can do on the land. So,
right. Understand, but if it adds as a flavor and a nature to the rest of what feels like a decision-making process on the wetland stuff, I certainly heard the commission start asking questions about that space. So it was of interest to them as conservationists.
So we can agree that we're going to do a site walk on June 8th and we'll make the determination if we're going to have a hearing.
Would it be the Saturday before June 8th?
Yeah, whatever that day is. And that's not a public site walk. It's just for our benefit.
it would be public in that.
Public site walk.
Right, because you have a quorum of the agency meeting in a spot.
Okay.
Meeting. But again, there's no discussion amongst the commission other than orientation.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Sounds like a plan. And we'll do that, agree to do that for the next item C and D as the new business rather than going through.
I haven't unmuted the applicant yet for those two.
Okay.
I think maybe we should view them all separately, right? I mean, we are discussing this, but I think that we need to do one at a time.
Yeah.
Procedurally, yes.
Phyllis, did you want to say something? I think I saw you light up for a minute.
Oh, no, that's okay. I'm all set. Thanks.
So that means we'll do a site walk on the 6th.
Yes.
Yes.
Notting Hills re-subdivision site walk on the 6th. Are we good to move on?
What time?
What time, Gary? Regular time?
Typically, it's 9 a.m.
Do we need to make a motion to do that, or did someone already do that? Sorry, I'm just getting a little.
We don't have to.
Okay, just want to check. Thanks.
You're just directing staff to schedule it. Yep.
Yeah, we asked Gary to do it. So moving on to item C, 21 Marshfield Road. Jen, if you could unmute the applicant so that we can speak to them.
Are you all set, Attorney Garrity?
Oh, sorry, Paul. Thank you.
Oh, he's muted.
He's muted.
He looks. Right. He's giving us the internet.
Okay.
Okay. So 21 Marshfield Road, your brother's keeper LLC, agent for owner Brandy. and Derek Moore for determination of a permitted non-regulated activity at 21 Marshfield Road for the cleanout of a culvert entrance and exit to maintain the natural flow of water, East Lyme Assessors Map 04.7, lot 19.
Okay, so being that we have two applications, and I just want to figure with the applicant here, we can clarify this. The owner, we have the first application of 21 Marshfield Road, Niantic, Connecticut. That application is signed by the owner, which is Brandy Moore and Derek Moore.
Yes.
Those are the association president, is that it?
No, those are the owners of 21 Marshfield Road.
And that's the lot that's on the north side of this culvert, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Because there's work on that property, there's one culvert, work on
Right.
21 Marshfield, and then there's work on the Giants Neck Heights side. So
Right.
we submitted the two applications, all the same work.
Right.
And 21 is the multifamily that's on the right side.
Right, the two family. Because the road itself, Creek Road, was it's basically an access road to the association clubhouse. And the road was put in there in 1954 to actually be adopted by the town, but the town named it but never adopted it. So basically the road, nobody owns the access road, but the association has been maintaining the road for all these years. And yeah, it just abuts both properties. 21 Marshfield Road is on one side of the road, on Creek Road, and then the association property is on the other side. So, and where we found this problem, I actually think the culvert got washed in during Sandy and nobody noticed it until recently. They had done some work, the town had done work at the same creek up at Marshfield Road and opened up the flow there. And when they opened up the flow up there, it caused more damage to the property down below because of the clog in the pipe down there in the culvert. So it's kind of, they relieved the problem at Marshfield Road as far as slow drainage, but now we have slow drainage down below. So to alleviate that, we just have to clean that culvert out. And the Phragmites on the other side, on the Giants Neck Heights side, is slowing the drainage out to the creek that is there. So, to me, it's kind of, if we clean the upside of it, the intake side of the culvert first, the Phragmites are actually going to be a natural filter for anything that could be washed down. But then after we clean the Phragmites out, because the Phragmites is just going to be a natural filter for anything that goes through the culvert. Most of the work as far as cleaning out the culvert itself, I believe, is on the upper side, the inlet side of the culvert. And then the Phragmites, trying to get rid of those because they're just choking out the marsh down there and choking out the waterway, that natural flow. So that's basically what we're trying to do.
Mr. Chair, so procedurally, if we can just take both applications, combine them together.
I agree.
And if the applicant's okay with that, we'll handle it that way. As it's one activity for one location, even though we know it's spanning two lots. We have permission from both landowners for the activity to occur and then to make application, obviously.
And who's speaking for the applicant to say that that's okay? Can I just have a clarification?
Should be Mr. Kennedy.
Mr. Kennedy, is that okay
Yes.
to combine both of those?
Yes, I put them in two different applications to make sure everybody knows that both property owners knows there's an issue when we're trying to deal with it.
Oh, I think we appreciate you doing it the right way.
Yeah, all he needed to do is really just fill out one and have everybody sign that one or submit a letter saying they can act as my agent, but he did it properly this way, so it works. So that said, I did want to point the agency to Section 4.1F of their regulations as it pertains to this application. Permitted uses as a right and non-regulated uses. Section S says the maintenance relating to any drainage pipe which existed before the effective date of any municipal regulations adopted pursuant to Section 22A, 42A of the Connecticut General Statutes, or July 1st, 1974, whichever is earlier, provided such pipe is on a property which is zoned as residential, but which does not contain hydrophytic vegetation. And that's where I stopped. And I was like, this should have been an exempt activity, but we have hydrophytic vegetation present. So I just, I'm just noting that. My opinion is because of that, technically it would need a permit, but keeping that in mind, I think it could be, again, for the purpose of this section, maintenance means removal of accumulated leaves, soil, and other debris, whether by hand or machine, while the pipe remains in place. So I think if we get a better description from Mr. Kennedy as to the level of work, maybe it is in fact a exempt activity, and after a site walk, that would, the commission could move forward. Kristen has a comment.
Jen, could you unmute Elisa? She wrote
yep.
in the chat, she's representing 21 Marshfield.
Go ahead, Elisa.
Hi. I just wanted to make sure you guys knew I was here and Representative Brian's definitely speaking for us. And I just wanted to let you know if you had any questions about the property, we're on board with Brian Kennedy. And I'll appreciate all the work he's doing to fix the flow of water going on down here.
Thank you, Elisa.
Excellent.
All right, so do we want to take a look at this thing? What do we want to do, guys? We've agreed we're going to join the two. We don't need to motion items C and D to combine technically. Would you like to?
I don't think you need to.
All right. We're treating items C and D as one. I've looked at the exhibits myself. Hopefully everyone else has. It looks like there's some work that needs to be done. Shall we also just either walk it or on Saturday the 6th, take a peek at this thing? It's pretty easy access here. It's fairly small, right, Brian? We could look at this thing in 5 minutes.
Yes, because it's just a matter of cleaning out on each side of the culvert. The upper side probably about 10 feet wide and out maybe 15 feet, just to kind of get the washout. Because right now the water flows down and into a hole in the ground because you can't even see the culverts on that side. It's so washed in. And like I say, I think Sandy actually did that, and nobody ever noticed it until this problem arose from the other part being fixed. But on the other side is the Phragmites that are choking out the flow. And so that's, we're trying to, when we're doing that, it's just a matter of pulling out what we can to kind of get the flow going and just cutting it down, just to try to keep it cut down, because the salt water, I think, is actually killing it off pretty good. But if we can get it cut down and a few years of the salt water getting up into it, I think it would just go away.
So it seems that we could, if we talk briefly about the process of how this is being taken care of, I don't think that we necessarily would need, seeing as Mr. Gaishel's saying it's a right of the, right?
Possibly, potentially. But again, as I noticed hydrophytic vegetation on the site, that's where the commission's got to weigh some discretion. Is it really regulated? And that's where, how would that material, Mr. Kennedy, be removed? Is it all by hand, shovel in hand? Or would you have to put a hose and maybe blow the pipe out? How would that be done?
Well, right now it's looking at getting probably a backhoe in there just to kind of get it dug out to begin with, because it's got to go down about 5 feet to get down to the culverts. That's the problem. And, we're talking something, maybe 10 feet wide, 5 feet down, and, just kind of tapering it up to be able to clear it so it doesn't wash back in as soon as we get it undone.
Right.
And so it's just, to me, I'm trying to do it as minimal as possible.
Sure.
And, hopefully once we get that cleaned out, just with some natural rainwater and some flow, it'll wash itself out. And if not, then we'll, try to just shovel it and clear it out.
Okay.
The inside, or hose it out.
Because that's fine. My thought here is, the commission, we grant the town every 10 years or so a permit to do work within 25 feet of every inlet and outlet that we have to maintain as just routine maintenance work. The permit's good for 5 years. We ask for an extension. At the end of 10, we reapply. Keeping that in mind, and that work does involve, the use of heavy equipment. It sounds like we're going to need a backhoe. So I would anticipate, just kind of hearing what I'm hearing, that it naturally will require a permit. You're going to be digging directly in the wetland. I don't, but again, maybe a site walk will help clarify that.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, go ahead, Ted.
Just the way I see it, he's trying to fix a problem rather than build any kind of a building. So we'll just have a look and see how it goes.
Right. Okay.
Agreed.
Yeah, my biggest concern is when they're using Phragmites, if they're not using chemicals on the wetland. I mean, and there's a lot of different ways to do that, and I'm sure that Mr. Kennedy knows some of the methodology to cover with plastic and dig out, and it sounds like he's got a pretty thorough understanding of saltwater's effect on Phragmites and getting that salt water in there to remediate them. So, I mean, shall we just take a look at it?
Might as well.
Sure. We'll look on the 6th, and then we can move on from there.
Yeah, sounds good.
I agree with that. Anything else on this application, guys?
Nope.
All right. So we're going to move on from here. Thank you, sir, for showing up. Thank you, Elisa and Mr. Kennedy. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.
We're going to move on to old business. There isn't any old business other than the old business that just happened. And I do want to double back on the agenda to our discussion about the regulations. And while I understand the importance of being kind to the other committees, and I do agree that we want to notify other committees and agencies and so on and so forth, I think that we should, rather than leave a massive amount of ambiguity here, specify who we are going to send off perhaps notice of our change of 100 to 500 foot of our upland review area. And I understand what both Gary said, and I understand Ted's concern. Keeping in mind that the commissioner is the only person we are regulated to send it to when it is only a change of boundary. I think we should define at this time briefly who we are going to send it to. Ms. Chantal?
Yeah, so sending it out, to me, just the list of people that we're discussing just really bogs down the process, especially considering the current time that we're going through. So can we really prioritize? I mean, it is nice to we should let people be aware that we're looking to make this change, but I think we need to prioritize who needs to weigh in on our decision.
The way it works with the commissioner, per the CGS, you send it to the commissioner, they may not make any comment. They get notified as to when our hearing's going to be. So they would be able to send back information. So as to your concern about, I mean, we can notify everyone and we can tell them what our timeline is, and we just simply wouldn't, it doesn't impede our ability to keep moving forth. We wouldn't suspend our next steps, as Rosemary's having a light show over here.
Yes.
You okay? I don't know what's going on. I don't know.
I was going to say, what's next? Pole dancing? I saw the strobe light.
Not tonight.
But now, are we going to a public hearing with this on the 200, 500, whatever?
Yes.
So if we're going to a public hearing, everybody's going to have the right to come and talk.
Right.
So yeah, we are potentially quintupling our jurisdiction. I think that whoever would in normal course get notified about this should get notified about it.
I think we should notify these people and be like, hey, if you have any comment that you would like to make, please send it to us by this date. And we can notify all these people tomorrow and say, please send it to us before the public hearing. And then by that night, we'll be able to make a decision.
We can't do that, Rosemary.
I didn't finish what I was saying before.
Right. Go ahead.
The CGS says that all we have to do is send it to the commissioner. So we're adding, I understand we're adding to that, right? We're bulking that up. If we're going to do that, we can't presuppose to add another layer of timing to these people that aren't even mandated by the general statutes to have to be notified.
Then let's just notify them and not have like a big procedure, right?
Tell them what we're doing. If they want to comment by the time the public hearing comes, they can.
Exactly.
I think
That's
turning this into another 8-year debacle.
Exactly. Stall, stall, stall. Keeping the
Yeah,
regulation.
no, we don't have to stall just because we notify people, but we also shouldn't like be minimalistic about who we notify people, because that's a little bit.
I agree.
If we're going to have a public hearing, we should notify all the public, and that includes boards and commissions.
Sure. I agree with that completely.
Everybody can come and or
That's what we're doing for planning.
yeah.
I mean, think about what Dave's actually saying. He brings up a good point. We're saying, hey, public, guess what? All you get is a little notice in the paper. But now we need to hand deliver a letter to all these different people to tell them, when the very public, that the act is.
I'm not suggesting hand notify anybody. Just announce we're having a public hearing. Period.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we send it to the commissioner, and then everything is already put into motion. Then we can make
That's what the law says we have to do.
Yeah. There's the law, but then there's norms, and I'm just concerned that if we start passing laws that affect our neighboring towns and we haven't notified them, that'll
land
piss
value.
people off.
I mean, you may be affecting my own personal land value by increasing it to 500 feet.
Gary's right there. I forgot about that. This could impact people in neighboring towns.
Yeah.
I currently have a wetland down the road. My lot has no encumbrances right now. I bought it that way specifically.
It seems you have a bias, Gary Gaishel.
Like, no, but if you reverse it,
and a bunch of others.
If Old Lyme comes up with some stupid Old Lyme rule and they start having to do enforcements in East Lyme town boundaries, and they didn't even tell us, we would be ticked off.
You're right. You're absolutely right, Ted.
Gary, isn't it bound by our property line, though?
Our jurisdiction ends at the town boundary.
Right, so it doesn't matter, Ted.
Yeah.
But if there's a wetland in Old Lyme, 500 feet extends over our boundary, it's regulated.
Yep.
Yeah. It's
if
called
there's a vernal pool in Old Lyme, it goes over our boundary currently, Ted. Just to be.
Well, I'm just talking about comedy, not the funny stuff that's going on here. COMITY. It's a fundamental principle of diplomacy.
I agree with Ted. Notify as many people as we can that this is when we're having our hearing, and let them give their input.
Otherwise,
why not?
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think we should notify people.
I agree with that too, and everyone.
I don't think anybody's saying not to.
Yeah, we should tell as many people as possible about this.
Yeah.
Just for
bingo. We all agree. We all agree.
Yeah.
So knowing procedurally, the idea of dragging of feet, because I've heard that we're not dragging of feet, and why it took so long to get to this point, there's a number of different reasons, but it certainly wasn't because we didn't know the process and who to notify. Every commission, be it planning, zoning, and wetlands, when historically we've changed the regs, we just send referrals out to all of these commissions. Hey, public hearing is on said date.
Great.
Give me your opinion before then. So we can put it into the record. So, yeah, that's just standard procedure.
All right. So,
Amen.
Sorry for the confusion earlier. It sounded. I just want to make sure we're not sitting here doing anything like, "Hey, let's wait to hear back from."
No. We have our own timeline. We don't want to do this forever either, right?
So I think we're all in agreement that we're just going to. Obviously, I needed to bring it back up because there wasn't clarity for everybody.
Anybody who wants to comment has to do it at or before the public hearing.
Agreed. Agreed with Dave Schmidt. Exactly.
Boom. Done.
Right. Agreed. Everyone's on the same page. Anyone else have any comments?
No.
Thanks for going over old business with me.
You're welcome.
Rosemary, buy a light bulb.
I know. Well, I don't know. I think I kicked out the cable. It's like, I don't know.
So, chairman's report. I have a 27-page document I'd like to read in. Joke.
Good night, Gary.
No, everyone. All I got to say is thank you so much for everyone doing this with the COVID thing. I know this is crazy. I think the silver lining is that we are finally stepping forth in the times. I've heard of a digital office for the past 20 years and a paperless office for the past 20 years. And I think we got a little bit closer during this. So everyone is freaking awesome for participating. And now I'm to Gary Gaishel, the Inland Wetlands Agent Report, Administrative Permits Issued. Mr. Gaishel.
I think I've already mentioned what I issued earlier, just after the coming about of COVID, which was just the 21 Marshfield, not Marshfield, Brightwater
Yep.
Road. That was the only thing I've issued since our last meeting. That brings me to enforcement, which I've already had submitted to the agency at the last meeting. My report, having gone out there, I went and I can certainly take more pictures if you'd like, but the site has not changed significantly since my last report. So I think that matter has been resolved for the most part. I don't think Mr. Pizzalia will be conducting activities like he was, or Mr. Smith. But we were able to remove a fair amount of older vehicles, if you will.
Is it done to your satisfaction?
Yes, currently. So I do drive by periodically and keep an eye on it. There's a development going on just on the other side of the state boat launch there. So I'm frequently there and I get to look over and check out both sites. So it's been pretty good. So I'm satisfied. I think that issue's resolved. And with that, if the commission feels that it's acceptable, we can take it off our agenda. Otherwise, that's all I have.
I think with how long it's been on there, we should take a look at it.
You want to sidewalk that too? You can.
I mean,
I won't go with you though.
Why not? I don't know what that means.
That just means I've been there enough times. I've seen it. In my opinion, I think it's acceptable based on the current use and what we permitted out there. He's pulled everything back from the pond, or in that case, the lake.
Are we allowed to go on a sidewalk on our own, or do we have to do it as a scheduled activity?
You can go individually as an agent when there's an application. We have that permission. We just have to go at reasonable hours, and we're supposed to notify the applicant. Typically, a lot of those cases, it's vacant land or the homeowner's not home, and you go anyway. But because I can't police all of you and keep calling the homeowners, hey, someone's coming out today. But I would anticipate that if you did go and you saw someone there, you would introduce yourself and say, I'm just with the Wetland Agency. You got an application in, and I have the right to inspect. And then it's between the hours of 8 and 4. So I think you're good there if you do that. I know. So that's it. You can. We have a violation pending. I think you can go out there and take a look if you wanted as an agent of the commission. Individually.
We need a badge.
Well, one thing I
We don't need no stinking badges.
If you look at the aerial figure 1, there's like 50 vehicles out there, and if you look at the most recent photos, it actually admittedly does look better, which is reassuring because this was first brought up, I checked, in June of 2019. So if it seriously took this long to take care of it, that is kind of annoying. So I'm glad that it's looking better now.
Yeah, I would say on that things could have moved a lot quicker on that particular case.
I would agree with that.
So that's all I have.
I move we adjourn.
I second.
Hold on. How do we handle this, guys?
So I'm satisfied with it. I would say there's no longer a violation occurring. There's no other matter. I'm just going to take it off the agenda.
Do we agree to do that?
But if you don't agree, if you want to go out there and look at it, go out there and look at it.
Maybe we can do a site walk, and then on the 8th, then we can decide.
6. Oh, we can do it a site walk on the 6th.
Decide on the 8th.
Yeah.
You know what? I think I like that idea because normally I would trust what Mr. Gaishel says, but we've had to go over this so many times and we've never seen it ourselves. So let's just take a look and satisfy it in our own individual minds, and then we can take it off.
Yeah, we can wipe it off this, agenda and we're done with it.
Yeah, I think that's the move.
I know it's outside our purview, but I wish we could make Marker 7 Marina clean up their site. But we can't, so it doesn't matter.
All right, so we're going to take a peek at that. We'll throw that on the agenda, Jen, for the site walk on the 6th, along with the other 2 sites, Marshfield and the previous Nottingham Hills thingy. So I think I heard a motion to adjourn the meeting made by Mr. David Schmidt. Do I hear a second?
I think everyone seconded.
Yeah.
Second from Kristen, Vice Chair Kristen Chantrell. The time is 10:50. All in favor, say aye.
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 I'm going to go through a roll call. Do we have anyone that didn't say aye to adjourning the meeting for Sue, just so that Sue knows? No. Doreen wants to keep talking. Joking.
Doesn't matter under Robert's rules. You actually don't even need a motion to adjourn. You can just adjourn.
We can just split. All right, we're done. It was nice seeing you guys.
Peace.
Everyone have a great night. Good work, and we'll talk soon.
Adios.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.